able to go to law school. I opened one of the largest African-American-owned law firms in Los Angeles, run by a woman. I was able to start a nonprofit and give back to my community. I get to appear almost nightly on national news shows where I get to stand up for issues and speak out on things that interest us the most. And just last week, I was backstage at a talk show, and I heard this investment banker. He was yelling into his cell phone. "There's no profit in nonprofits," he scoffed. It stopped me in my tracks. I almost laughed. Then I thought about the food banks providing food to hungry families, the nursing agencies providing prenatal care to single low-income moms, the pro bono agencies providing free legal services and other support to families. I even thought about the smiling faces of the kids in my nonprofit when they received their free, brand new backpacks filled with school supplies. But most importantly, I thought back to one hot summer day in St. Louis when I was 12 years old. See, it can hit 95 in St. Louis without thinking twice. And with the high humidity, it can feel like steam is rising up from the sidewalks, especially if you've been standing for hours in a long line, like my brother Rodney and I were, waiting for cheese. Now, see, neither one of us would have been out there, but our grandmother heard that they were giving away free cheese to families like ours in the housing projects all over the country. So Grandma sent us out to get it. Rodney was mortified. But see, Grandma had been shot in a domestic violence situation when she was 32. She was at her best friend's house. And she and her best friend found themselves raising my siblings and me. So they needed all the help they could get. There wasn't any work for folks in wheelchairs in those days. No handicap ramps, no special services. And my grandmother's disability check didn't go far. So Rodney and I stood in that line, waiting for cheese, probably melted cheese, given that heat and humidity. Somebody in that line said this was government cheese. But they were wrong. Do you call the government when you're in need? Isn't it the folks in your local communities that you look to? Maybe the person sitting next to you, the church down the street, maybe even people in your community that you don't even know, but who have come together in a nonprofit to do good. It wasn't the government that put food on our table. It wasn't the government that taught kids like me in after-school programs or taught me how to open my first bank account or get my first job. And it definitely wasn't the government that taught me how to swim on the other side of town. It was nonprofits. And why does everybody call them nonprofits when we all profit? See, as a kid, I didn't know that word. And I couldn't appreciate how much nonprofits had done to improve my life. And when I was pushing my grandmother around in that big iron wheelchair, I wasn't thinking how great it would be to help others. I was thinking I want to go outside and play like the rest of my friends. And sometimes I was even thinking, why me? But see, my life today would be a big surprise to that 12-year-old little girl, but not to my grandmother. She knew she was laying a foundation for me that would be like bedrock when I needed it most. And did I ever need it? when my son Marty was diagnosed with autism. I was completely devastated. Took me a while before I could even say the word without weeping. And some days, I couldn't get out of bed. But gradually, thinking back to that line, I realized that when my grandmother sent Rodney and I out to stand in that line for cheese, it wasn't just about putting food on the table. It was to teach us invaluable lessons about humility, generosity, and resiliency. And thinking about my grandmother's strength, I was able to summon my own. I knew I had to be at my strongest when I felt at my weakest. And I thought about, what would my grandmother do? And I went to work. I read everything I could. I talked to healthcare providers, educators, teachers, parents, anyone that would provide information. I learned that autism was the fastest growing childhood disability in the country, impacting 1 in 64 children. I learned that African American and Latino kids are diagnosed 2 to 4 years later than their typical peers. And I learned that thousands of kids right here in our own Los Angeles community suffer to access services just because of the color of their skin. And the more I learned, the more passionate I became about trying to find a way to help others. See, I wasn't looking to become an autism advocate, but autism advocacy found me. And when I had done as much as I could do to help others, and I was trying to figure out what was the next step, I remembered the cheese. See, I was too young to learn the name of that nonprofit that had managed to bring all of that yellow cheese into my neighborhood. But I never forgot the faces of the staff and the volunteers that passed it out. They were doing good, and they knew it. I'll never forget the joy that I saw in their faces. So when it became my time, it was almost like second nature for me to start a nonprofit. I call it the Special Needs Network. Turns out families were hoping for the services that we would bring. And now, after 10 years, we've helped 50,000 kids and families right here in our own Los Angeles community. Some may say, Ariva, it's just one nonprofit. But we've touched the lives of millions of kids and families across California. And we've helped to elevate the issue of autism in underserved communities. We've elevated that issue to a national level. That nonprofit proves that that investment banker was wrong. There is profit in nonprofits. So if you are passionate about a cause, if you care deeply about a group of people who you know are working to change the lives of others, do something. Get involved. And when you've done all that you can do individually, find a group of people and start a nonprofit. The impact that you will have on the lives of others is immeasurable. The effort that you can make to change the lives of others will change you in ways you can't even imagine. And if you get stuck and you're wondering what the next step should be, do like I did. Remember the cheese. Thank you.
And good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure her story is like many of our stories as nonprofit founders, executive directors, perhaps even as board members. We do this work because we love what we do and we know that we have a social impact. We are so excited to have you join us for our inaugural For the Love of Community Summit. You are joining us from North Carolina, California, Florida, Michigan, Maryland, New Jersey, and Virginia. And we're so excited to have you with us today. You're going to be hearing a lot of information from nonprofit experts today. On tomorrow, you'll be hearing from other nonprofit practitioners like you. And we just have a wonderful treat as we are getting started this morning. So we're going to just go ahead and get started. I would ask in the chat, if you would please introduce yourself this morning. We want to use this as an opportunity for you all to network and meet each other as well. Some of the participants and attendees have already started putting their information in. And if you would take this opportunity, just put in your name, your organization name. If you have a website or contact information, please include that in the chat as well. We've got a full day planned for you today. The agenda has been listed on the stcconsultingllc.org website if you have any questions about that. And we will also be keeping you informed throughout. So today we're going to get started with a real treat for us. You know, one of the unique things about this particular event today is that we've been very intentional about making connections. If you've been in the nonprofit world, as I have been, you'll know that oftentimes there's a disconnect between the philanthropy side of nonprofits and the public charity side, the service side. And what we have done today is we have brought those two things together. And you know, I think I need to tell you who I am. I am Dr. Catherine Ado of STC Consulting LLC. I have 20 plus years of experience as a nonprofit consultant, but I also now currently run a nonprofit. I have in the past. My background and training comes out of community development, working with local churches to help them establish 501c3 organizations. And you're going to get to hear from some of those people today. Thank you so much. I see everybody is starting to chat now and introduce yourselves. And we're excited to have you do that. So if you're ready, I am ready. I am so excited to introduce to you our keynote speaker for today. This young woman is very, very accomplished in the philanthropy world. And I'm going to tell you just a quick story about how we met. I received an email that shared her and what she was doing and in the community and as far as her work, and decided to reach out to her and say, hey there, hello, I support you, how exciting. And it began a relationship as we began to chat and talk. She and her background is on the philanthropy side. I'm going to introduce her shortly. And I was on the public service side, and we just came together and kind of birthed this idea of a virtual summit. So let me tell you a little bit about Councilwoman Susan Hairston. With more than 30 years in leadership roles at large grant-making foundations, Susan brings a wealth of experience inspiring leaders, solving complex problems, and translating government and foundation expectations to nonprofit and constituent success. Her extensive network and proven results drive positive change with every engagement. Susan directed grants management at the JPB Foundation and directed the Ford Foundation's $450 million annual grant-making operations team. She made history in November 2019 when she was elected as the City of Summit, New Jersey's first African American council member. Woohoo! Her educational background includes a degree from the University of Pittsburgh, a Master of Public Administration degree from Seton Hall University, and Congresswoman Councilwoman Hairston is an Ascent Fellow from Dartmouth Tuck School of Business. Please join me as we welcome her. And Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. And I heard you call me Councilwoman Hairston, so I'm gonna call you Reverend Dr. Catherine Adu, my sister, my fellow mentor coach, and what an awesome morning it is. I am so grateful for this opportunity to be here. And I want to thank you and your team, Catherine, for organizing for the Love of Community Summit. What a wonderful opportunity it is for philanthropy and for the nonprofit sector to get together and be all about our community. I want to give a shout out to my amazing team, the Susan Hairston Consulting Group, who are all about strengthening nonprofits that serve the beloved community. And that would be Deanne, who is our Chief Strategy Officer. That's Susan Chase, who is our Chief Risk Officer. That would be Ray, who is our Chief Financial Officer. That would be Brooke, who is our Chief Development Officer. That would be Elijah, Chief of Staff, keeping us all together, and Ashley, who takes care of our social media. We are all about the love of community, and nonprofits are our people. And I want to also take this opportunity to thank you, the participants, who took the time out to make sure you are being the best that you could be. And you all even paid money to be here. So that means you are serious about bringing good things to your community. So, my role here is to really kick off this summit, which I predict is going to be a love fest of learning and equipping each of us to be the most excellent nonprofit practitioners and funders that we can be. I am so blessed to be walking in my purpose, and which I want you to know is to share all of the secrets that I learned in my career in the nonprofit sector, in the philanthropy space, and now in government. And I want to share the secrets about how you can get funding. So I want to ground us first. And I'm having a little problem with my deck here is not moving. Let's see what we can do. There we go. There we go. I want us to ground us. I want to ground us first in what the topic that I'm talking about, and it's the importance of building nonprofit capacity to receive funding. And I want to say this in another way. A strong organizational infrastructure will make funders chase you. So in grounding us, I want us to start with, to receive funding, and we all should know this, to receive funding, you must be doing good work. There must be a need for your good work. And as a nonprofit, your motive is to make sure you are accomplishing your mission. You're not out here to make money. Unless you're a consultant to nonprofits, then you are. You need to make money. But I want us to know that you are not about the business of making money. Now, later on, Julius is going to tell you, excuse me, Samantha is going to tell you, you're not going to be operating at a deficit. But that's for later on during the workshop today. So regardless how much funding you're receiving, I want to make sure you walk away from this summit knowing that you are certain your organization is doing good work, that you are making sure your organization is strong, and that you are able to effectively communicate. You are able to talk about internally and externally about your work, about your organization, and what is so important to me about our beloved community, the people that we serve. So we're going to start with me sharing. What are we doing here? Sorry, guys. Let's going to present, and we're going to go forward. There we go. We're going to talk about this first topic, which I want to say is very significant to funders, is leadership. Now, when we're talking about leadership, we're talking about your board of directors. Funders want to know who is governing your organization. They want to know what is your board comprised of? Are they experts in your area that you're doing the work? Are they people who donate money? Do you have a volunteer organization where you are actually a working board? Your funders need to know about your leadership and that they are always looking over the organization and governing. They also want to know about your executive staff, your leadership. Leadership matters, you all. And they want to know about the experience that your leaders have. They want to know about the capability that your leaders have. And folks, if there's another thing I want you to write down and make sure you're aware of, that your leaders are collaborators, that you are not alone. These are not the days to be alone in your leadership role. Because I want you to know, funding is about relationships. And so your leadership matters, your board matters, and funders want to know that your leaders are in relationship with them as well as your constituents. And so I want to share another thing that matters to funders, the reputation of your leaders. And that's something that I want you to be aware of, because funders talk to each other and they share about organizations that they're funding. So your leadership matters, and I want you to make sure you're paying attention to that. And Dr. Adu is going to be diving in deeply into that area. Okay, let's see. Trying to go forward here. The next area is so important. What type of communication are funders interested in? All of it. And you should be as well. I'm going to start with communicating in your proposal. Are you telling the story about your organization effectively? Are you talking about what you do? And are you talking about, always what I say, who you serve? In your proposal, you need to be telling the story. You need to know that you need to make sure that you are in your proposal communicating what your funders are asking for. If it's not clear, I want you to ask them. Sometimes in my role at the Ford Foundation, we would see pages and pages that never got to the point of what they were going to accomplish for their constituents. So I want to make sure you're knowing you're communicating in your proposal about your work. Also, communication, the digital presence is so important. Funders want to know that you have one, and we know in this time of COVID, when we're not able to have in-person meetings, when we're not able to serve our constituencies, you've got to have an online presence, and it needs to tell your story properly, effectively. And so internally, you have to have a digital strategy as well, because you need to be able to compile data, because your funders need to ask you for that information and you need to be able to easily access that. And always on your mind, I know that I've talked about relationships and word of mouth, but marketing and communicating your organization externally and even internally, you need to be making sure you're not only talking about your activities, that you're talking about your accomplishments, that you're talking about your outcomes, that you're talking about the impact that your organization is having. And go back to the proposal, I want you to talk about the challenges that you have, the needs that you have. Do not be shy about asking for what you need in your communications. And then lastly, and it's a pet peeve of mine, that I want to make sure you are centering the story of your constituents in your communications. We have allowed others to tell our story, and sometimes it's from a deficit perspective. And we heard from Areva Martin, there is not deficits in our communities. We are resilient, we are overcomers, and we need to make sure that that's included in our communications. Let's see. The next area, the ever important, oh, sorry about that. Let's get back to, let's see, where are we going here? Sorry about that, guys, bear with me. All right. The next area that is so important to funders is, what are your finances saying about your organizations? And we know that financial statements tell a story. They tell a huge story about where your emphasis is. And you want to make sure that you have a narrative that supports what your finances are saying about you. I want you to make sure that you know how much it costs to run your organization and to run your programs. We're talking about budgeting, budgeting for revenues and budgeting for expenses. And what we tell our clients at Susan Hairston Consulting is that you need to have different scenarios. You need to talk about when things are running well, and if you had money come out of the sky, what would be the optimal costs for running your organization, or in a crisis time, when you are needing to operate on bare bones, you need to have these budget scenarios available and on hand so that you can be responsive, so that you know how much it costs, because your funders are going to ask you. It's a little bit of a negotiation there. If they have extra money available and you're in relationship with them, they're going to say, can you put together a budget? And I want you to be able to do that. And so spare no expense in making sure you have a financial professional on your board, on your staff, who can create your budgets in a way that tells the story properly. And I know that Samantha Dillingham is going to go into that for you in her area of the webinar. I want you to know something that is been on the horizon in big private foundations, and I'm hoping that it's trickling down to other funders, but it's knowing your indirect and your overhead costs. And this relates tremendously to knowing how much it costs to run your organization, because your indirect and your overhead covers your maintenance. You need to know how much it costs. There used to be a time when they capped you at 10%. There is a movement to fund nonprofits at the level that they deserve. It started with the government, believe it or not, several years ago. And now private foundations are increasing the amount that they are willing to fund for your overhead, your indirect costs. But what I say to our clients, you need to know how much it costs to run your organization, and don't cheat yourselves. Do not cheat yourselves. And that goes along with what I say, make sure you're asking for what you need. Know what you need and ask for it. Sometimes we think we have to be frugal in our budgets. You need to have that conversation with your funders. This is what I need. I can operate differently because I'm going to seek it elsewhere, but I need you to ask for what we need, because sometimes our nonprofit organizations in our community shortchange ourselves. And so I want you to know that the next area that it's not going to be talked about today, but fundraising. What they want to know about your finances is that you have diverse revenue sources and that you have a plan for financing your organization from diverse sources. And so that's something that you really need to make sure you have awareness in your nonprofit organization. And the last area, let's make sure I can advance to this slide correctly, is something that's near and dear to my heart, because I served on the compliance and operations side at the Ford Foundation and at the JPB Foundation in grants management. And that is that you care about compliance, and that is following the legal requirements of your nonprofit, that you are knowing the financial and the reporting requirements in all areas of your organization. We're talking about 990s, we're talking about payroll taxes, that you are compliant with the rules that dictate your nonprofit organization. Because guess what, folks? Funders are under a spotlight, and they have much compliance that they have to answer to. And I always bring out the IRS code, is something that dictates our life in the nonprofit world behind the scenes, that some folks don't know about. Your attorneys and your CPAs and your bookkeepers need to know that they are following, need to know about the IRS code and that they're following all of those rules. And so why funders care about this is because your reputation impacts theirs. And they want to make sure that you are able to comply. And what I want you to know funders will do, I was often talking to program staff about making sure you're including in their grant ways in which that they can hire the CPA, that they can have an audit done. And so that is something I want you to know, and you're going to hear about that when the legal team, Attorney Lisa, speaks to you all. So these are the 4 areas that I know matter to foundations, and that Dr. Adu has put together this amazing summit to make sure that you get to dive deep into these areas. And at this time, if there's anything that you want to ask, I'm turning the mic back over to have Catherine join me, and we're going to entertain questions to you, questions from you. And I want you to take advantage of this opportunity to ask anything on your mind about somebody from the big foundation world. And Catherine, are you here with me?
I am here.
Okay.
Hello there. So listen, we have just gotten the inside skinny from somebody who worked within the foundation, more than one, about what it is that you need to do in your organization. The technical word we use for that is internal capacity. Why is it important for you to focus on building your leadership, communication, finances, and compliance? And so I'm excited. I hope that that alone was worth the cost of your registration today, just to be able to understand the mindset of potential funders. So this is what I want to do now. I'm going to ask in your chat box. We do thank you. Everyone is introducing themselves. If you would, please make sure that when you're communicating, that you are doing so where it says all panelists and attendees. We do see that you are chatting. I'm so glad we're getting connected. We've got some great folks on with us today, and we want to entertain your questions. So this is an opportunity for you in the chat to put some questions in that you would like for Councilwoman Susan to answer. I'm going to start with just a couple. We're gonna go until about 10:55 with questions. But Susan, one of the first things you talked about was leadership, and that's my thing, is really understanding about leadership. And can you talk a little bit more, because something you said really struck me, is that funders are interested in and concerned about the reputation of the leaders. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Because most funders, in my area of expertise is in the private philanthropy world, where foundations have access to government and influencing policy. And so they are wanting to work with the leaders that have the best expertise and that have a reputation, and that they're proud to call a grantee of theirs. And so that is why leadership matters. You do not want to have scandal. You do not want to have mismanagement of money. And those are something that has come on the horizon for funders to start asking in your applications, in your proposals. What's going on? Is there any scandals in your organization? So leadership and reputation absolutely matters.
Okay, and then, you know, a number of folks that are on today might be community-based or grassroots organizations. They may have smaller size boards, and you and I know that sometimes there are some challenges because they don't always have the big name people on boards or that kind of thing. What kind of recommendations would you make to a smaller nonprofit organization that has a big vision, needs to be funded, but maybe is still working towards being funded? What are some practical steps that they could take that would help them prepare for funding?
I love that question. I love that question because my life was that of a serial volunteer, and I inherited that from my grandmother and my aunties. And yes, being involved in a small community organization, you need to know where the money is, and there are your council people know where funds are, your community foundations. You don't have to go to the Ford Foundation. There are more dollars in your state and in your community that you can have access to. And so your board members, who are you looking for? You're looking for people who are hard workers and who care about the community and who are not afraid to ask on your behalf. And so that's a mistake people often make. They think they have to go to the big foundations. You need to know your banks have um, corporate foundations, and they are required to show that they're good um, community residents, CRAs. I think I need Brooke with me to talk about that level of engagement with the community. But your banks and your local corporations have philanthropic arms, and sometimes they're not good at reaching out. You have to find them and relationship build with them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, I always share with our clients that relationships is really at the basis of nonprofit service. It's always about being connected in and trying to get connected where you can. You said something else real interesting too, that is a philosophy, if you will, that I've adopted. And, historically, the conversation in communicating about our communities has been to focus on what's lacking, what's missing, what's broken. But instead, I'm a real fan of talking about assets. And so, how can nonprofits kind of position themselves to learn more about the positive things that are going on in their community? And then, how do they frame that so that the funders can understand the positive things as well as some of the things that services that may be missing that the nonprofit wants to fill?
Oh, so critical. I'm going to take us back to the days when we would see Africa presented on television with the starving children, to really tug at our heartstrings to help us write that check. People, those days are over. We do not, those days are over. Anybody who's been on the continent knows that they got it going on, and we don't need to be presented in that way or need to be asking for funds in that way. And if your funder is only wanting to talk about the deficits, you may not think that they are worthy of giving you money. I actually want to flip that script. Who's worthy of doing work with you, partnering with you? And so I want you all to recognize that I have said, say what your challenges are, but we need to make sure we are telling the stories of success and resilience. And I really loved, thank you for sharing Ariva's TEDx, because there is now a tension happening in the country, and we have to tell our own story. And we know that there's some oppression that is keeping us from being our best, but we're not receiving that. We are showing up, and it has to be a part of your relationship with your funder. And their funders are looking within now and making sure that they're aware of that.
Yeah, so this is really an exciting time. You and I have had some conversations about what we're seeing happen on the philanthropy side as they respond to equity and diversity issues as it relates to funding. So we have a question from one of our participants, and here's the question. What or who would you suggest as targets in the community to focus on to support as a nonprofit? And then it's if you are a grassroots nonprofit, how do you properly choose board members when the people are possibly unknown to you?
So you all need to go find a STC consultant, because yes, I want you to know that has been the most beautiful thing that I have found since entering the consulting space, focusing on nonprofits, that as a grassroots, you have the passion, you have the will, you have the connection to the people, and you need to connect yourself with professionals who have your best interest in mind. And you will need to look at the community foundations. If I remember, Catherine, your community foundation came and found you, and they knew that you knew where the grassroots organizations were. And part of what foundations offer is opportunities for board membership. And because there are a lot of people who want to do good and don't know how to find the organizations that they're interested in. And people like Catherine are able to direct them to your organization. And so grassroots are just so essential. And what I know, there's been a big movement to have physical sponsors. And now I'm getting into the technical terms, and I'm hoping that in one of your later sessions, you may talk about that, because grassroots, it's important for you to align yourself with an organization that looks out for your paying bills. There are organizations that offer that service at a very reasonable cost. And as you work with them, it actually grows your capacity. And what starts as a grassroots sometimes turns into a hardy nonprofit. And Catherine can say much more about that than me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And yes, we definitely have been very successful in helping develop grassroots community-based nonprofits. We didn't start out that way, but we know that there's a wealth of resources and talent in our communities, and people who are very caring and concerned about their communities. Oftentimes, they don't understand that there's a business side, and we certainly have been able to help them in achieving the build-up. We lay the foundation. I always say, you know, if you need a strong foundation to build a house on. So by going through the process, getting the 501c3, our organizations are able to then compete for funding dollars just like any other nonprofit, because they have the 501c3. And so as we talk about that, let's talk about the money.
Let's talk about the money.
Let's talk about the money, honey. So you mentioned, and I loved it, you said, don't cheat yourself, ask for what you need. And I think one of the challenges sometimes is that we have a hard time doing that. So what are your suggestions about kind of how do you figure that out, what you need? And then how do you represent that appropriately in a grant application?
Great question, especially because for years, funders have discouraged us from asking for what we want. And I am so glad that funders are reckoning with that now. And so we 100% have to break that starvation mentality that we hold. And if you have staff, I know staff can tell you what they need. Ask your staff what they need. When you are, if you are an arts community, if you are a youth development, if you are centering your constituents, if you are clear about your mission, you need to know what it takes to accomplish that. And you need to know how much it costs. And you need to be unapologetic about stating it and listing it and asking for it. And that's where I talked about having different budgets. If a windfall came on your doorsteps, are you prepared to be able to know how to use that money? And that is where it is just critical for you to know how much it costs and what your constituents need, so that you're making sure you're asking for it. And what I said, I can't emphasize enough, you need to know who to go to. And it's like it's like a maze. I say to funders, you need to be making yourself more available to the community. They have a tax break, and they are given IRS privileges that corporations are not paying the taxes that they're supposed to pay now, but they are allowed to operate the way they do philanthropy because they're getting a tax break. And they are required to give out a certain percentage of money. And so one of the things that they are trying to do better is making themselves available. And so if it's not happening, it's going to be happening at the local level. I talk about an organization called Candid. They used to be called the Foundation Center. Your public library may even have a database that talks about who are funders. And y'all are gonna think she stood me up to say this. You have to find the Catherine Adu in your community, because she knows where the money is. There are private donors who have set up private anonymous funds that they want to give money to. And so we've got to look for transparency, and your council people know this. Your council people know this, and that's why local government matters. And your state government knows this, because there is a partnership between philanthropy and government and the nonprofit sector. The nonprofit sector has really grown to be huge. And so it's the source of many jobs. And so you're needed. You're needed. And grassroots, you are needed, because we'll sit on our laurels and say everything is all good until you rile us up and make sure we know that no, things are not good. You're important, and people will fund you.
Awesome. Well, listen, we are winding down on the questions. We've got about 3 more minutes. I don't see any new questions in the chat. If anybody wants to jump in and put a question in the chat quickly, I'm happy to ask it for you.
One question, I'm sorry, Catherine, one question I wish people would ask me is, what is the most common reason that proposals are turned down?
Thank you. That's a great question.
Okay, I always wish people would ask me that question.
Well, we're going to ask you right now.
And that question, the bigger foundations you go to, the more competition you have for those dollars. At the Ford Foundation, they received annually more than 40,000 requests, and they gave out less than 2,500 grants. All right. Now, when you go to the local community, I had the opportunity to attend a grant makers association event in New Jersey, And I met all of these local grant makers, and they said, we don't have enough people applying. And so why would they turn someone down who came to them? Their people are asking for money for things that they don't fund.
Okay.
All righty, so you need to make sure you've done your homework about who you're asking for money from. That is the main reason proposals are turned down. It doesn't align with what they fund, or it's a great proposal, but they don't have enough money in their pool to give out for all of the people. And then one thing I want to add to that, make sure you ask them, do you know someone else who's funding in that area? That's what foundations are good at.
That's excellent. Well, Susan, we want to thank you for being with us today. I know your schedule is super duper uber busy, but I just thank you. You've just really shared some valuable nuggets that I hope our participants have been taking notes. I've got 2 pages of notes myself. I've learned so much, and we do thank you for being with us today. There's a question that came through about the board. I'm going to answer that question in my leadership presentation because I'm actually about to start talking about the boards. So Susan, thanks again. We appreciate you and your team. They've been flawless and such a wonderful support. And registrants, I'm going to turn the program over now to our facilitator for the rest of the day. Yeah. So she's going to come on, and there she is.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining in on today. And we're going to get right into our first segment. And our presentation today for our first segment is on keys to success, leadership development. And our presenter, you already have been introduced to her, and her name is Dr. Catherine Addo. Dr. Catherine Addo is actually a person who has been in nonprofit for over 20 years. She has helped churches, faith-based organizations, schools, and other nonprofit organizations improve the quality of their community-focused programs. Her formal training and certification in education, law, theology, and community development has uniquely prepared her to help nonprofits start and grow. Dr. Addo is on a mission to rebuild communities as she bridges gaps and connects neighbors. She uses practical principles to create long-term solutions to challenges faced by people living in marginalized communities. Dr. Addo teaches nonprofit seminars, is an executive coach, and is in demand as a speaker sharing her passion for innovative community initiatives. Additionally, she serves the community through her radio program, Community Inspirations with Dr. K, heard weekly on WDRBmedia.com. And without further ado, I present to you Dr. Catherine Addo.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm back. And I am going to be sharing with you today about leadership. It is, and you just heard Susan just shared about how important that is. And I am going to open up my screen and we're going to go through this short presentation. I'm only going to be with you for about 30 minutes. And my presentation is Nonprofit Leadership, Who's in Charge? And so as Susan has already shared with us, it's really the board of directors that is critically important. I know we had a question about who can you reform your board. In a nutshell, yes, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But she talked a lot about leadership and about the capability of the leaders, about developing collaborative relationships, making sure that your board members have relationships, connections, networks in the community, because that's the value that they're going to bring to your organization. And then she also was talking about the reputation of the leaders. So let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. So when you are wanting to grow and develop your nonprofit, our goal at STC Consultant LLC and any reputable nonprofit consultant is to help you establish a viable and sustainable nonprofit from the ground up. We have really distinguished ourselves in spending a lot of time developing a very strong foundation for nonprofits to grow on. And if you'll take a look at this schematic, it actually kind of walks you through the life cycle of a nonprofit organization. So for many of you, when you get started, you've got this dream, a vision, and a mission. And in order to move that forward, to actually create the nonprofit organization, you got to put a little water on your dream. You put a little water on what it is that the big dream that you have, and then how you want to implement that big dream. And when you pour a little bit of water on it, that's by filing your documents, and you have some growth. And it's right in here where you're having the documents and the requirements that you actually are starting to pull together and think about who's going to serve on your board of directors. A lot of people feel like it's the filing of the paperwork, which is critically important, but here is the key. The selection of board members is going to stabilize the growth and development of the nonprofit going forward. So it's really important that you really kind of focus your energies there. Our next step, we're going to grow a little bit more with policies and procedures. And so as you are starting to operate the nonprofit, you begin to start developing how it's going to operate, what are the rules, and so your bylaws are going to be an important part of this. And the bylaws also are going to dictate what the responsibilities of the board members and officers are. As we move forward in growth and development, we jump into budgeting and planning. And so we're going to share about that today as well. And this is where you really start getting a hold of the money. You've got to understand, as Susan just said, you have to understand what kind of money you need, where the money is coming from. But Samantha's going to share with you and our team, our financial management team, you also need to have some records. You've got to have some facts and some things in place that are going to support your programs and services, because you don't want to be what I call a one-hit wonder. You kind of jump out, you have a great program, but you do not have what's next, which is the sustainability. So we want to have visibility. We definitely do. We want to have programs and services. That's your activity. But our goal from the beginning is to ensure that your nonprofit organization has sustainability. And so the parts all work together as you're building and growing. So let's talk about the board. And Susan said this exact thing without seeing my presentation, that leadership makes the difference. So your board of directors has the legal responsibility to manage and direct the affairs of the nonprofit organization. So therefore, the selection of highly qualified board members is critical to ensure proper administrative and financial management. Bylaws are required that state how the nonprofit organization will operate. And generally within those bylaws, it's going to include provisions for the board of directors. So a good set of bylaws should have when the board meets, how many people are going to be on the board, how long do board members serve, all of the details about board operation. When is the end of your fiscal year? who is going to do what offices exist, and what are those responsibilities. So these bylaws really become a very strong foundation that supports the nonprofit organization. And that's something that you really, really want to make sure that you have a good set of bylaws. So the board responsibilities includes these 10 specific things, and there are more, but I just wanted to pull out some of the real basic kinds of things. And by focusing on these things, it will position you so that when you are completing a funding application, these are the kinds of questions that they'll be asking. So if you are intentionally focusing your attention on meeting these 10 things, you'll be able to represent this information in a funding application. So we want to govern, board members want to govern with care, loyalty, and obedience. So determining the mission and purpose, a lot of times when we meet clients, we're meeting a founder who already has a vision. And so one of the suggestions that we like to make is that as you are determining your mission, your purpose, what you want services to look like, you want to do that with a board. One of the challenges nowadays is that there's so many things that vie for the attention of people that you might want to serve on the board, whether it's their personal responsibilities, their personal interests, their jobs. And this is volunteer. So the IRS says that your board members can't be paid. So what you're looking for is someone who's going to share the vision and the mission, this passion that you have for the work that you want to do. Start with that and then identify and make sure that people are available. Having communication with potential board members on the front end is going to help you long term. The board is responsible for selecting the chief executive officer. So that's often called your ED, the CEO. There are a lot of different names for it. Your executive director is your day-to-day staff person who is going to oversee the operations under the leadership and supervision of the board. So the board is also responsible for supporting and evaluating this chief executive officer. The board wants to make sure that there's effective planning. So when it comes to writing business plans or having a strategic plan that helps you figure out how do you bring services online and when do you do what and when do we know that it's time to do that, your board should be a part of that process and that conversation. So it's not just you as the founder always driving the car. So once you get through the formation pieces, then you want to really make sure that you've got an active and engaged board so that they know what's going on. Because what I've seen is that if you do it all, they're going to let you do it all. So that you're going to have some expertise in management so that you can bring everybody together to try to create this cohesive unit of folks that are meeting to help make decisions for the nonprofit. Number 6, you want to secure adequate financial resources. Your programs and services and your money run together. And a lot of times, I love the nonprofit world too. We get very excited about services and making sure that we're out in the community serving the people we love. But we're not always mindful of whether we have enough money to keep us out there over time. And so that's the board's responsibility to make sure that those finances are balanced and in place. The board is also responsible for protecting the assets and providing proper financial oversight. This doesn't mean that you need to run out and get an accountant. It does mean that you need to find some people that feel comfortable with handling the money, that have some expertise, and then you all can hire an accountant. You can hire a bookkeeper. You can hire people to work alongside your nonprofit. And I think it's important to know from the beginning that you're not going to be able to get every service for free. There are some services that you're really going to have to pay for, and certainly an accountant or a bookkeeper is money well spent. So you want to build a competent board. That means you have to have some communication with them to know what their skill sets are, to know what they're willing to share, because not everyone who has a skill set or a network may want to share all of that with your organization. Have some conversation about what is it that they can actually do, and then hold them accountable for that thing. You want to maintain, the board is responsible for maintaining legal and ethical integrity and enhancing the organization's public standing. Your board of directors are brand ambassadors for the nonprofit. So you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. You want to make sure that they are speaking well of the organization. And if they're not, then that's something that you all need to address, because the expectation is that this board is going to speak well of the organization to their own sphere of influence, and potentially funders. So you want to make sure that everybody has an understanding about what's expected. Now, the board of directors does have 3 fiduciary duties. And so when I talk about fiduciary, what I'm saying is that the board is acting on behalf of the community based on an expectation of trust. So when these nonprofits, these 501c3 organizations, public charities, and the foundations are set up, there's an expectation that they exist on behalf of the community. So founders, you can't own the nonprofit, but you and the board are stewards of the nonprofit. And so board of directors then have these responsibilities as they provide administrative and financial management. So first, there's a duty of care. The board member must exercise reasonable care when making a decision as you steward the nonprofit. That means attend meetings, be informed, rely on trustworthy information, exercise independent sound judgment. This is a biggie for the IRS, because there's a concern that they have in making sure that there are no conflicts of interest, so that board members are getting some type of personal financial benefit from being on the board. And then the board is responsible for monitoring nonprofit activities. You've got to check up and check in with that executive director and be clear and know what exactly is going on with the nonprofit. There's also a duty of loyalty. So the board member can never use information obtained as a member for personal gain. He or she must act in the best interest of the organization. So you have to, at all costs, avoid self-dealing transactions. And what that looks like is, if your participation on the board, and let's say perhaps you have a board member who may have a business that can benefit in some kind of way from the nonprofit paying them for service, there's a potential conflict of interest and self-dealing that is in that the board has to be very, very concerned about. There is should be a policy, a conflict of interest policy that exists within your bylaws, and perhaps a separate policy. The way that I develop those is I actually develop it, and it requires your board members to sign it every year. There's also the potential too that funders may ask, do you have a conflict of interest policy in place for your nonprofit, and may want to see a copy of it. This is all a part of establishing the reputation of the nonprofit. Your board members are to decline corporate opportunities for the nonprofit. So if in their interactions with the public, your board members find out about a business opportunity, and I guess you could kind of liken it to getting a stock tip. You can't do that kind of insider trading. We don't really have that on the nonprofit side, but we do have situations where your board members may be offered an opportunity that's for the nonprofit, but they cannot take that opportunity and that information and keep it for themselves. Their loyalty as they serve as a board member is to ensure that they're always acting in the best interest of the organization. And then all confidential information belongs to the nonprofit. So one of the challenges of being a public charity, a 501c3 organization, is that there are some higher expectations of transparency. So the IRS is happy to say, hey, nonprofits, we know that you serve a valuable role in the communities, and we're willing to give you this 501c3 status so that you can benefit and your nonprofit doesn't pay federal taxes, and your donors will also get a benefit. And so there's no problem with that being done. The real issue comes up with, because your nonprofit is getting public funding, either from individuals, corporations, government entities, um, there has to be a track record and a place where people, the public, can look to make sure that the nonprofit is solvent, that the nonprofit is real, that it actually exists, and also gives them opportunity to really see your financial reports. So there are some parts of nonprofit operation that the public is going to see, but they don't need to see everything. So if at a board meeting, you're having a conversation about very confidential information about the inner workings, or your nonprofit may represent individuals who may have medical histories or something like that, that might even come up for a discussion or a conversation at a board meeting, but it's confidential and it needs to stay within the confines of the nonprofit organization. So there's also this last duty, is a duty of obedience. So the board member is expected to be faithful to the organization's mission and must act in a way that's consistent with the central goals of the organization. So you heard Susan talk about it from a funder's standpoint, but again, board members are already obligated to obey applicable laws and regulations. So faith-based organizations and churches, even though you don't have to file for a 501c3 designation, the IRS automatically gives you tax exempt status. The church still has to abide by the applicable laws and regulations of the state and of the local municipality. And faith-based organizations is the same. You want to make sure that you are following the bylaws. So your bylaws are written in a way that, and they should have a provision that allow board members to make decisions if they need to either rescind some of the provisions, revise some of the provisions, whatever it is they need to do. The board has the full responsibility for making a decision about what information is considered and should be inside the bylaws. And then you want to make sure that you're making mission-focused decisions. So I've had the experience sometimes of having nonprofit organizations having a mission to do one thing, but then they find out that there's funding available in a totally different area that they don't serve. So they kind of decide that they're going to make up something just to go run after that money. And so there's a duty of obedience there, though, that makes that an inappropriate decision, even though it's very tempting. It's an inappropriate decision to shift your mission. Why? Because the public has already been informed by you through your website, your social media, your pamphlets, whatever way that you are communicating. And they're expecting that if they write you a $10,000 check for, what can I say, for whatever your mission is, let's say it's providing homes for feral cats. They write you a big check to take care of cats, then you're not to use that money to take care of dogs or to take care of some other group. Whatever it is that your mission is communicating publicly is where your funding and your decisions need to focus. Okay, so I'm going to look in the chat. I'll take a couple of questions if you have them. So yes, there was a question here that asked about the importance of a collaborative board. So, you know, what you want to be able to do after you select the people that you want to serve on the board, there is really a next step to helping your board gel and get to know each other so that it is a little bit more collaborative. But this is what my experience has been. If you jump out of the box, if you head out of the gate and you're gung-ho as a founder and you're not bringing those board members in, the mindset is going to be that I don't have to do much because the founder is going to carry it. And that is not the case. You don't want to communicate that. What you want to do is that you want to be, yes, so you want to be working in collaboration because this is how it needs to connect together and you have to be intentional about it. The other question was, can you reorganize a board that's not functioning? You absolutely can. Your bylaws should have a provision that allows for you to, it should have a section in there about how often you select board members. So you need to be having meetings and those kinds of things, but there should be provisions there so that you can identify new people to serve on the board. And so, yes, the board does have full responsibility for making decisions. That is something that is really determined by the law of your state. And the IRS is also looking at that too. The founder's role actually is one, once you start operating, the founder's role actually becomes something that is really more historical. So a founder is not an identified office that the IRS would approve. So as a founder, you're going to have to make a decision whether you want to serve in the staff position as an executive director and work in cooperation with your board, understanding though that the board does get the final say. The other option you have as a founder is that you can choose to be a board member, have the authority that board members have, and then you all will need to find an executive director. And for some grassroots organizations, because your board size may just be 3, 4, or 5 people, I've known some of my clients to actually choose to kind of work in the role. They have a board chair, and that board chair kind of wears a leadership hat where this is a working board where everyone is working together to get it up and operating. So that's how you would deal with that. But there is a delineation between the executive director and the board itself, but they are connected. So a strategy would be that if you decide that you want to act in the executive director role, then you'll need to select a board chair who is somebody that's compatible for you to work with, who is going to support what it is that you're trying to do to get it moving forward. Okay, we've got about 6 more minutes. Are there any other questions? Anything I can clarify for anyone? Okay, let's see. I'm not sure if I see any more questions. Okay, we talked about the collaborative nature. Yes, so I answered the question about full responsibility for making the decisions and what the founder's role is. Okay, all right. So, okay, you're very welcome. I'm so happy to help you. So this is what I want to say to you as I get ready to wrap up, is that working with a board, being in this nonprofit space is really all about relationships. And so as you move from formation to operations, you want to be thinking about two things. You're developing relationship and getting that board of directors kind of collaborative, get them working together, get used to meeting, get used to connecting with them. Make sure you have a way to connect so they know what's going on. So you are building that within the board itself and board operations. The other thing that the board is doing is that you will also be thinking about programs and services, but that comes from the board too. And I see that we did. So how do you delegate roles and responsibilities of board members effectively? I recommend and use with my clients an application process. I actually have developed a letter of invitation and an application that allows a board member to submit a resume and to also within the application tell you what their skill sets are. And once you get that information, you'll have a better idea of where to put them. So sometimes the challenge is that you may have a board member that is highly skilled as a finance person who ends up being the secretary. And that's not really their skill set. So the tendency is that, and remember, it's volunteer. So nobody's getting paid. So you want to put people where they have an interest because they'll be more highly motivated to function within their skill set. And so again, this goes back to communication on the front end and also having some conversations. Even if you don't want to do something as formal as an application, you're going to have to talk to people to ask them, what assets can you bring to our organization? And you as a founder or someone who's been a part of the startup, you have to have clarity also in letting them know, what do you want them to do? So that then they can tell you from the beginning if that's something they can do or not. Okay, well, all right then. Thank you so much for your engagement. Those are awesome questions. And I am going to turn the program back over to Yolanda. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Catherine Nadeau, for that wealth of information.
And now we're going to move right into our second segment, which is on information technology and communication. And our presenter for that segment is Julius P. Rainey Jr. Julius is a skilled digital strategist and technologist with over 12 years of experience as a project manager and nonprofit technology leader. His core competency is using his creative, analytical, and strategic acumen to assist underserved and underrepresented priority populations, nonprofit organizations, and small to medium-sized businesses in fulfilling their fullest potential. He specializes in articulating value propositions that will utilize technology to solve traditional problems in non-traditional ways. And now I present to you Julius P. Rainey, and he is the president of his own company, JRU, which is a website development and digital company. It's now your turn, Julius.
All right. Thank you so much, Yolanda. Thanks to everybody for attending today. Let me get my slide up and going. I hope that everybody has enjoyed so far. Some pretty powerful information that we're giving out today to help you advance the mission of your organization. So today we're going to talk about the keys to success using IT and communications. So I want you to think about when it comes and relates to technology and communications. If you don't have a plan or a strategy, then how do you really measure your success? And so far throughout the conversations this morning, that's what Councilwoman Susan Hairston and Dr. Doe has talked about. They have talked a little bit about IT and communications. And so it's important for, not only just your funders, but your benefactors to really know about what you're doing. And then whatever your mission and vision is, making sure that you're doing that most efficiently. So we're going to talk today about two things that are keys, what I consider two important keys to IT and communications. So let's start. So this research firm did some research and talked to technology professionals or executive directors or just staff members at nonprofit organizations. And they were very excited and happy to report back that 85% of respondents believed that technology was critical to the success of their organization. 85%, that's real high. They understand that there's value in technology and that it's critical for them to be successful as a nonprofit organization. On the flip side of that, only 23% of those same respondents of those organizations only had a long-term strategy and vision on how to use technology, right? So 85% knows the value of technology and its importance. That's when we're speaking of technology, we can go ahead and wrap in communications as well. But only 23% had some type of plan or ideal of how to use it or what to use to help them meet their mission. All right. So technology has a very broad stroke across nonprofit organizations and businesses in general, right? So technology positively improves organizational effectiveness in three key areas. That's strategic planning, marketing, getting the word out about what you're doing as a nonprofit organization, constituent management, communications, fundraising, which is very big, service delivery, reporting back to your funders, day-to-day operations. Those are things such as, emails, and you need still at this point a copier machine or maybe, computers to help you do your work, and then training and education. And not only training and education for your staff, but think about your constituents and your benefactors. So what does technology connect? How does technology connect, right? We use technology to help nonprofits connect with important stakeholders. And those stakeholders include clients, board members, staff, potential clients, potential donors, and potential funders. And lastly, diverse populations. That's based on age, race, class, gender, religion, ability, and socioeconomic status. So technology helps nonprofits to not only just document social and economic impact on the people it serves, it also increases engagements by stakeholders both inside and outside of the nonprofit. It helps to increase funding. You have your technology structured and set up right, then, for example, having a donate button on your website that integrates with some type of customer relationship management system, known as a CRM, and then meeting reporting requirements to funders and regulators. And Catherine mentioned that earlier in her presentation. So what are the keys to success that I would like to share with you all? The first is a technology plan. And the next is using online communications to communicate your mission and your vision and the impact and the progress that you're having in your community. And before we get started, when you see the word technology plan, I know some of you probably like, oh my gosh, that's like that 20-page document that requires me to spend an inordinate amount of time, maybe a day or two to create. I don't have the capacity to do that. How will I do that? Well, today I'm going to speak about a technology plan that's a one-sheeter, right? That will help you to understand the who, what, when, and where of the technology plan. And then we'll do the same thing with online communications, give you a few tips, and then we'll wrap up the presentation. All right. So what is a technology plan? We're going to be very basic here. A technology plan is basically a blueprint, right? So you have blueprints for houses, you have blueprints for a variety of things. And just as there are blueprints everywhere else, technology plans provide those blueprints for nonprofit organization. The key benefits of it is that it provides a comprehensive vision, right, for the organization. So you have your board as well as your staff helping to buy into this technology plan. And so that creates a comprehensive vision from all of your stakeholders to understand how we're going to use technology to push this mission forward. And then focus and direction, right? It helps you to understand where should we focus. If we need to replace all of the computers in our organization and we're serving after school students, then if we need to replace those computers, right, we know that we need to focus our fundraising efforts and our grant seeking after those dollars to meet that part of the technology plan. So when I talk about a technology plan, I'm going to go through a couple of things here. And again, this is not anything that will take you 2, 3, 4, 5, 20 pages. Literally, if you can take these things that I'll share with you today, it will help to give you some structure to the technologies that you would need to meet certain goals and the mission of your organization. So the first thing that you should do is establish a planning team, right? Who is going to work with you? It doesn't have to be a team of 20 people. It doesn't have to be a person that has been working in technology for 30, 40 years. What you need is a diverse opinions about what technologies they think is important to helping you meet the mission. So that can include your various stakeholders such as board, your staff and constituents. And the purpose of this is to prevent any type of bias. So that is your who. Who and the technology plan is about establishing your planning team. So the next thing you need to do is assess where you currently are. That's the where. Where are we currently? What tech do we use? What tech do we not have in our arsenal that we need to add? With the tech that we have now, what works well? What doesn't? So when you're assessing the technology, you're trying to really get a better understanding of what tools are working best for you and which tools you currently don't have, but you want to add them, again, to your nonprofit organization to meet that mission. So now we're going to move into determine priorities, because we know as nonprofit organizations, we don't have all of the money that we wish we have, but we do know that there are some key priorities that we need to determine. So that's the what and the why. So I would recommend that you sit down when determining your priorities, create two sides of the sheet, create a wish list, right? And then on the other side, create a need list. Move those items from the wish side to the need side and prioritize them. And then the key thing is ask yourself, why do I need this platform? So prime example, one of my clients is looking at using text messaging for a fundraising campaign from October to December. Now, last year, we purchased a text messaging platform, but we didn't use it as it should have been used. And so again, you have to ask the question, why do I need this platform? And the other question becomes, do you have the right people, on your team, if that's staff or consultants, to help you manage this platform? Because again, technology is a tool, right? It doesn't make sense to have a whole bunch of tools in your toolbox if you're not going to use them effectively. So I kind of sort of thinking about when a person is building a house and they're getting ready to paint. If you don't select the right tools in building that house, then you'll probably find yourself working much harder. So imagine if you needed to paint a wall and you brought your tool as an artist paintbrush, a little small paintbrush that people paint pictures with. That would take you an inordinate amount of time to paint a wall in a house. So you want to make sure you know why you need to select this tool and why to use it. The next thing is to create a budget. All right. How much is this going to cost? I always recommend that, you explore different options, right? Just as there are a variety of restaurants and grocery stores, there too exist so many technology solutions to help you meet whatever goals you're setting for yourself with this technology plan. So do your due diligence and search and find out how much. Never think about, I wouldn't make a decision based off of pricing alone, right? Because you can buy a very expensive tool that doesn't do much, and you can buy a less inexpensive tool that can do a whole lot. And then lastly, Well, next you want to develop your timeline. How long is this going to take? The when? Is it going to take a month, a few weeks, a year? That's important, right? Because that helps you to better understand what capacity you have and what resources you need to fulfill this technology plan. The last part of this is the how, right? How are you going to put this into place? And this is where, again, you would research some more solutions. Do you want to go with a consultant? Someone that's like myself or someone on the STC consultant team? Or do you want to work with a large vendor? Maybe someone like Dell, if your finances allow you to do that. And I think the most important thing, and a lot of people don't understand this, and they underestimate the values of volunteers. Most nonprofits have some type of local college or university where students are looking for the opportunity to provide some real life experience in the real world. So maybe one of the things you can do after you create your technology plan is maybe meet up with a local university or college and ask them, can you work with maybe some of their computer science majors or communication majors to help you with maybe implementing a technology solution, all right? So what we're gonna do is show you an example plan here. And again, right now we're gonna look at the who. Who's gonna help me put together this plan? In this example plan, I'm thinking, okay, I have some board members, maybe use 2 or 3 of them. I have 2 staff persons that I will use. So that's who will help me to work on this plan. Where are we currently? Well, my nonprofit organization, we have an awesome website, but we still haven't integrated the donate option. And I know you're like, well, it's 2020, that should be everywhere. But truthfully, there are some nonprofits who still have not integrated this option into their website. So then what do I need? I need an online donation form, and I may want to look at the text to donate feature. And why? Why do I want that? It's because I want to try different ways of soliciting funds. So an online donation form may work better for my older population, people that are in their 50s, 60s on up in age who prefer to donate online. But then you may have some of your Gen X and some of your younger populations who may prefer you to send them a text to donate. And when you text to donate, they click on that link or they text back the keyword and they're able to donate. So continuing with the same example plan, how much would this cost? I threw out a rough number, $1,200 per year. That's the tech fee for that solution. And maybe the vendor, whoever you select to implement this solution, may charge $1,200 for their fee. Then the when is going to take about 3 months. And how am I going to do this? Again, I'm going to use a vendor. And then what I'll do is get that vendor to train my volunteers to know how to use that system and to become what I call a champion of that particular tool. And a champion of your technology tools are basically the individuals who will be the project leader, the person that helps with getting this installed and pretty much is the go-to person when there are concerns about this particular tool. All right, so that's technology, right? So let's move over to effective online communications. I have this Starbucks symbol picture up here showing open 24 hours. Little do you know that your nonprofit, when you are online, and you should be online in some capacity, is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there are no geographic boundaries. If we were probably 30 years back in the past, right, we would literally see that hold on for one moment. Oh, okay. All right, so I was told my screen isn't sharing. Hold on. Oh, okay. What about now? Okay, so y'all didn't see it the entire time? Okay. I'm sorry about that. I had all of these pretty slides and stuff. Sorry about that, y'all. But let's get back to it. All right, there we go. So here I have this sign that shows Starbucks, which there are some Starbucks that's open 24 hours a day. And one of the things you have to take into consideration is that now that we're living in a time of technology, it's important for people across this world to be able to access you as a nonprofit. And when I'm saying accessing you as a nonprofit, I'm not saying you directly, but understanding and learning about your impact and what success stories, right? I think that it will be important to share the success stories of students, not only to our funders, but to other students so that we can bring them into the program. Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to tell the success story? To recruit more high school students and as an opportunity to fundraise. Now, this is where it gets key because again, earlier we talked about technology being a tool. So this again is an opportunity for you to pick the right tool for your audience. Because these are high school students, they're not too much big into Facebook this day and age. They're more into TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, or text messaging. So remember the who, what, why, and the where. Another example, let's look at the parents and the students, right? That's the who. So what are we trying to get to them? We're trying to give them resources. And I know you may say, well, what resources can I come up with? I don't have the budget to hire somebody to write resources. Well, think about partners. There are other nonprofit organizations and foundations that write blogs, that have infographics, that have toolkits that you can literally send out an email or post on your social media channels to connect them with that information. Now, I'm not saying that you should just use all of your partner information all the time. That's okay. Of course, you should also integrate maybe once or twice a year, an organizational document or resource that you created. And of course, that may take you working with, again, your local community college or university to help you write it. So why do I want to produce these resources? To educate parents on helping kids graduate on time. So again, since these are parents and students, where would we show these things? I have here email, Facebook. You may want to consider Instagram, webinars, Facebook Live for the parents. And then you may want to jump back to TikTok, doing some videos, Snapchat, and all that for the students. And lastly, listening. So I say listening is the thing that most people don't think about. We think that we're going to go out, post things on social media, then it's done. The very aspect of sitting and listening to people. And again, you're not maybe listening to audio, but you're doing what we call social listening to hear the stories or the comments in those social media posts, and even on your website as it relates to blogs. People may send you direct emails, right? Asking you or maybe giving you a suggestion, or maybe you may receive a message from your website through the contact us form. But listening helps you to really understand, number one, what is it my audience want? And number two, how can I create additional content for this audience? So I have a few communication tips for you. Number one, you want to be consistent. You want to really get into storytelling, right? And you want to set up a communications calendar. So being consistent consists of communicating regularly. One of my clients, we have really gotten to this goal of sending out a monthly newsletter and doing some updates across our social media channels. I think that it's important for you to communicate regularly about your program and organizational updates, your constituent successes. And again, think about what channels, communication channels, where are you going to communicate those things? It is really, and I learned this from a client, that we used to only communicate during fundraising season and we got no money. Why? Because people don't want to hear from you when you're just asking for their donations. They want to know, what did you do with the donations from last year? What are you doing with the organization? How have constituents benefited from this work in the past? Those are the things that you can communicate regularly about. Again, it doesn't have to be long. You can do something as simple as asking one of your students in your after-school program to record themselves on their phone. Doesn't have to be super professional. Just make sure they can see their faces and they can hear People can hear them, but that helps to communicate what you're doing. Most importantly, have a consistent brand experience. Make sure that your graphics and photos align with your mission. So if you're serving high school students after school programs, you shouldn't include pictures of babies, right? Because that throws the message off. You want to stick with your brand colors. Think about the colors that have been used on your website as well as within your logo. Storytelling. A good story is relatable to people of all ages. So, and also one of the things about storytelling that you should take into consideration is that we now have the attention span of 8 seconds. In 2018, it was researched that our attention span dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. We now, as Americans, have an attention span less than a goldfish. And so that's why it's important for you to have storytelling as a strategy in your communication. So using photos, videos, infographics, and images can supercharge your story impact. And by the way, did you know that 72%, there was an increase of 72% views on articles when people use what we call infographics? And this is an infographic that catches your attention versus just seeing text that says 1.4 million pounds of trash. So think about using tools like Canva to help you with infographics. Communication calendar. Social media is everywhere. As this image shows, you have so many things that needs to get done. So think about creating a communications calendar that provides content strategy and a plan. It also helps you to identify your resource gaps. Like, do you need finances to do online advertising in your human capital? And then also think about holidays and celebration. That's general holidays such as the 4th of July, Labor Day, and then think about mission-related holidays that you can announce and support. Here's an example of a communications calendar. It's nothing big and famous, but you see here they have colors for each type of communications. It's newsletter, Facebook, Twitter. You put those colors on the calendar and write out what you're going to do. And this helps your board and staff to understand what we're going to be working on and what we're going to be communicating. So I have a few resources here that I'll share with you before we wrap up. I recommend that you look at these resources for Technology Plan, Nonprofit Tech for Good, TechSoup. The Taproot Foundation is very famously known for connecting nonprofits to skilled volunteers through pro bono services. So literally, they will give you people like myself for free to help you with your website. Give Lively is a free fundraising platform for nonprofits. You want to check that out. And then other resources for effective online communications, Nonprofit Marketing Guide, TechSoup, Taproot Foundation, and Canva. All right, so that is all of my presentation. Want to know if I had any questions. See if I can get back to my screen. Doesn't look okay. Looks like I may have one in the chat. Okay, do we have any questions in regards to the information that's been presented? Okay. So we were asked to display this screen here for just a few moments, the resources. And again, this is to help you create your technology plan. All of these resources have guides and blogs and different resources to help you create your plan. But I think the most important one that you really should look at is the Taproot Foundation. They literally put out projects for people such as myself to sign up to create a website, to create your communications plan. And then again, here's the resources for the effective online communications. Okay. Yeah. And what I'll do is actually copy and paste these and put them in the chat for you when my session is over with. I'll do that during the break at noon. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. looking forward to the rest of the day. And I turn, oh, so somebody asks, well, do we have time to take those questions? Okay. So someone asked, if you are intimidated by social media, what I say, start small. That's the first thing. But again, understand who you're trying to communicate to and what's the purpose of the communications. If you're trying to get more high school students to get involved with your nonprofit, then use a tool such as Snapchat and TikTok. But again, you really have to be very strategic. And can we get technology grants? Absolutely. There are some foundation and local community foundations that will give you money. That's the importance of doing your technology plan. If you know what you need, then you can create a grant around that and ask for some assistance to purchase that technology. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. And I will be turning this back over to Yolanda. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay, I was muted. So thank you so much, Julius, for that information that you shared with us on information technology and communication. And also, thanks to Dr. Catherine Ardot again for that key to success in leadership development. And now we're going to prepare for a little comfort break until 12:30. During this time, we will be having a video presentation, and that video was pre-recorded prior to COVID-19. Thank you everyone that has joined in so far, and we look forward to seeing you back at 12:30. Thank you.
Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, and those streaming live through WDRBmedia.com and iHeartRadio. You're listening to Community Inspirations with Dr. K, and I'm your host, Dr. K. If you're just tuning in, the STC Consulting LLC team is here with me in the studio for a panel discussion on branding and your online presence. Oftentimes when nonprofits get started, they're not really thinking about how other people are going to find out about the work that they're doing. And so just like a for-profit business, it's equally as important, perhaps if not more so, that a nonprofit organization gives some thought to the branding. How do they want to tell their story? What are they doing? There's just so many parts to it. So I have two experts with me today. Attorney Lisa McDowell is with me, and Mr. Julius Rainey, who are specialists in their own right in the nonprofit world. And so first of all, I want to welcome you both to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. K.
Yeah, so we have spent a good bit of time working together as part of the STC consulting team, helping nonprofits get started. And we also have some clients that we work with who are also have already started, but are now needing some more support with operations. And would you agree with me that branding is pretty much probably one of the most important things that a new nonprofit could actually give some thought to? Do you agree with that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, most people don't think about that part of creating a nonprofit, right? Most people, think about doing the great work, which is super important.
It is.
But also, just as you stated, a for-profit organization thinks about their branding and programming. Nonprofit founders and leaders have to think about their branding and what are people seeing when they see your material online or in print. And so I think it's very important.
Yeah, so, and while we're talking about that, because a lot of times we use terminology and jargon, but aren't always really clear. What exactly is branding?
So branding is not logo. Right. So a lot of people think that your branding is logo. So, I've worked with clients and even the nonprofit that I work for, when I first started working there, it was like, the logo, the logo, the logo. And that's not the brand. They always thought just that little emblem was the brand. The brand is how you make people feel, right? So it's the colors that are involved. It's when a person visits your website, how do they feel? And that's what a brand do. I mean, think about some of the largest brands that we have around today. Best Buy, they make you feel good about knowing that you can come into the company and talk to people about your tech needs. That's the brand of those type of organizations, and nonprofits have to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, and I think, too, and Attorney McDowell, we had talked about this, too, about the importance of using this branding to tell your story.
Yes.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about the importance of that and some of the pitfalls of what happens when you share the wrong information.
Yes. As a general practice attorney, I've had 30 years of experience, so I'm not specialized. I've worked with a lot of nonprofits over the years, and they just assume, like you said, a logo is sufficient. But one of the things that they don't often do, they have this great idea, they're so motivated, but they don't look to see if maybe someone else has thought about this idea, and they may run a long way down the road before I even meet them, before they even come to me for a consultation, and they are infringing on someone else's brand. There's a whole school of intellectual property where people can protect their ideas, their brands through trademark, through copyright. And if you don't do your searches, your due diligence up front, you may already, before you even come to the lawyer's office, be infringing on someone else's trademark. And though you may say, well, they do widgets and we do helping special needs children, they may not want you to use their name, their brand, their logo, because people will get confused. So it's very important to make sure you're communicating the right things. I had one group that wanted to be ladies of the night to help people who experience trauma. And that had some negative connotations. So you want your brand to say positive things about you and not create images that you don't really want to say. Even the acronyms you use, you want to make sure that's a positive acronym and not hate.
Yeah. And I would add that, excuse me, a lot of people have to, I think before you start thinking about your brand, initially, don't even think about your logo. Think about when a person comes in contact with your organization and whatever the name you come up with, how do you want them to feel? I think that's the best way to really think about your branding is, how do you want people to feel when they come in contact with me as the executive director or the program manager or even as a tech person or whomever is connected to that nonprofit? How do you want them to feel? And then I think you should start thinking about from there, your messaging and then your color scheme that you want to go with. And then after you do all of that, then that's when you either decide to go and do the logo yourself, because that's possible, or you bring somebody in that's a professional to help you.
And I think, and even in that process, it's really important to have an understanding of who's your target group. Because oftentimes I've found with clients, they are very passionate about their vision, as they should be. But there has to also be this time that's taken to really clarify who are the services to attract. who are the programs supposed to benefit? And then once that background work is done, and that should be not only the visionary, but the board members who are in place. This is a process of building and growing the business. Once you get the formation paperwork done, then you have to focus on how do you want to grow this business out. And so in talking with other people, and particularly talking with your board, you can narrowly identify who your target market is and then begin to brand. Because oftentimes what people do is they have a name, they've checked the name with the state, the name is available, they may have actually gone on to see that it's not been a trademark name and it's available name, and they get so caught up in the name, which is important and which I would say is a part of branding. So you want to make sure, as Attorney McDowell was saying, that you don't have something that's going to be offensive, that has profanity in it, something like that, because the end game with this nonprofit is that you want to attract the people that you want to serve, and you want to attract donors. So it's not just one group of people you're targeting. You've got a number of people with your public charity or your private foundation that this nonprofit is going to interact with, and so you have to be kind of thinking about that from the beginning and to give some thought to it, and then setting yourself apart and being distinguished. So talk to us a little bit more about that, Attorney McDowell, about distinguishing oneself, so that you want to focus on your uniqueness, but then you don't want to be so unique that people don't know what you're doing.
Right. You need some consistency in your branding. If it's pink one day and blue the other, and makes you feel happy and then mad or excited the next day, that's not a brand that will really stick with people, that will really set you apart. They won't know who you are because you're trying to do so many different things. You want a brand that reflects who you are, but not to the extent that it puts you in a box. There are people with strongly held political views, and if you're moving into the nonprofit arena, nonprofits are not supposed to support a particular candidate. They're not supposed to tell people how to vote. And you've got to look at your social media. When people look for you today, they're looking for you on social media. So if on one platform you're saying, I hate, this type of group or that type of group, or you can only support that, that begins to represent your brand, that begins to either affect, to tarnish, and you may want to reach a narrow group of people, but that may not be the same people you need to reach as donors, as Kathy was saying. So you need to make sure that you are branding yourself, what you do throughout your social media in a consistent way that lines up with what you want your nonprofit to accomplish. And you certainly don't want to get revoked because you are delving into political issues when nonprofits are not supposed to do that. Voter education, voter awareness is important, but what is your nonprofit doing? And is your branding tarnishing your vision, or is it enhancing it?
Absolutely, and that's just something that you have to think about. And you touched on something that is really important. Oftentimes I have clients who have already had personal pages. And so they've already been expressing their views, their personal thoughts about things. They may use language that is pertinent to them personally. But once you go forth with social media on behalf of your nonprofit business, then you have to be mindful of toning down and being aware of what is on your personal pages. And I've personally had clients tell me, I didn't select your company to work with you because of your business page. I've been watching your personal page because they were making a character judgment about me and whether they wanted to invest the money. So I have a for-profit business that is raised even higher with a nonprofit, because most nonprofits, if they're public charities, you're depending on the public to donate. and give money. So they're going to be looking not only at the nonprofit and what it's doing and saying in social media, but you personally as the visionary. And I think that also kind of takes us into talking about this forever footprint
Yes.
of social media. So,
Julia's expertise.
so Julia, let's talk a little bit about this forever footprint, because, it's kind of like, you can tweet something real fast, and even if you pull it down in seconds, it has still already made a footprint. Somebody has seen it somewhere, and it's recorded somewhere. So talk a little bit about just the technology and kind of how this actually works with the branding and the social media specifically.
Definitely would say once you move into the social media space, which I want to say, social media is where a lot of people are moving to, most definitely. And I want to say this, it's still critical though, and most people think that it's not, but it's still critical to have a website. I want to throw that in while we're having this discussion before we talk about footprints. A lot of people just tend to think, well, I have a Facebook page, personal page. Some people think just because you have a personal Facebook page that's enough, but once you have established yourself as this entity, as an organization, a nonprofit, then it is best for you to pick whichever social media channel works for you, right? I tell so many people that Facebook works for certain nonprofits, like my nonprofit that I work for. We use Facebook. We don't use Instagram. We use Twitter. So once you find that, then select that platform that works for you based off your target audience. But once you have that presence established, it's important for you to be mindful of what you're saying, right? Because once it's out there, it's out there, right? And so you want to make sure that you put your best foot forward, because even if you, like, for example, on Facebook, you can put something up and take it down, but that doesn't mean somebody has not screenshot it, right? Or they hadn't already shown some other people that may have been in close proximity. So, this whole thing about social media is good, but it's a double-edged sword, because it's not like a conversation, right? We may say something to each other right now. 9 times out of 10, we're not recording. We're just listening, right? So our mind has digested and held on to whatever we've talked about, good or bad. Whereas with Twitter, specifically, and we can see, that with a lot of our leaders going on across the country, that when you say things, you can't take them back. I think even some years back, I recall reading an article that says, like, all of the tweets now become a part of Library of Congress or something.
Oh, wow.
I think that they're trying to store, especially the ones that are most important, right? But the ultimate goal is to be very strategic and methodical about what you want to post. I want to just say something about uniqueness real quick. That may be a good exercise for nonprofit leaders to do, and this is something we're doing now at Parents for Public Schools. We're looking at some of the people that are our competitors that do maybe some of the similar work, and we're looking at what content they're posting. And rather than just copying or mimicking what they're doing, we're trying to figure out, how do we make ourselves unique, what particular resources that they may not be capitalizing on, and how we can actually come in and produce those resources so that we can have our unique branding value in the marketplace. And so I think it's important for you to really know specifically and intentionally what you want to say on social media platforms, and then you want to make sure that your message resonates with the audience that you're targeting. So,
and then you've got to make it unique. You can't go in and be a copycat.
Nope.
Because in this day and age, if you think Nike swoosh is cute, so I'm going to swish instead of swoosh. You will get a cease and desist letter. And they do not play. So you really want to come up with unique things, make sure they're unique, protect your ideas, but don't be a copycat, because it will not benefit you in the long run.
Right. And I think one of the ways that you can, because there are so many potential pitfalls, is find professional people to help you do the work. Because a lot of times folks are, and I understand that you want to save money, but nonprofits are not built to be Lone Ranger business initiatives. This is not a sole practitioner type of practice, or it's not a solo entrepreneurial endeavor, it requires a group of people, and you need to have some professionals. And people will ask me sometimes, well, I'm getting my nonprofit started. I have a little bit of money. I have it allocated to pay for formation assistance. What should I pay for next? And I tell them, find a good financial person, a good legal person, and a good branding person for marketing. Those are, interestingly, where you wouldn't think about it on the front end, they are very interrelated, because as you come up with ideas and as you are interacting with the public, there are all types of potential legal issues that are there. Quite frankly, just doing the paperwork to form the nonprofit is all legally oriented. And so many times people are entering into this nonprofit world thinking that, oh, I just have activities and put up some flyers and tell people to come and we're operating, and that's not really the case. So nonprofit organizations are identified as nonprofit corporations in North Carolina and a lot of states. And so because you're entering into the business world, it's just that you're using a nonprofit form instead of a for-profit form. It's really important to make sure that you get the right advice, that you have the right people who are knowledgeable and trained to support and help you, particularly as you're building and growing.
And who care about you and some of the things that you care about. Because I think people make a mistake when they just go to any person who can do a website or any nonprofit consultant to talk with their board, or any attorney who may have never worked with nonprofit formation before. You need to know, first of all, that they are interested in what you're doing, and then they care about what you're doing. Because if you're just another number, they're just going to check the box. It's not going to be branding that's going to suit you. It's not going to be something you can build a good foundation on. And good advice is the secret. And good counsel, and a multitude of counselors, there is safety.
Absolutely. So we're going to be right back, and we're going to finish up today's panel discussion. You're listening to Community Inspirations with Dr. K, and I'm your host, Dr. K. You're tuned in to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, heard 24 hours a day on WDRBmedia.com.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. We have heard this morning on how to build community-based nonprofit capacity to meet your mission through leadership, board responsibility, and technology. Now we will discuss how to build internal capacity to meet your mission with financial management. For this key to success in financial management, we have three presenters. Our first presenter today is Lisa McDowell. Lisa is a licensed practicing attorney, providing quality, personalized representation for nonprofits, churches, businesses, and individuals for over 20 years. Her law practice takes a mission-driven approach to advise and strategize with clients to achieve their goals and objectives, connect with necessary resources, improve their quality of life, and positively impact the community. Our second presenter is Samantha Dillingham. Samantha is an accountant and financial consultant as owner and president of SMD Business Finance LLC. She has over 20 years of experience in various financial services industries. Her positions have covered services provided in banking, lending, insurance and investment, accounting, and financial services. As a professional and skilled partner, she provides accounting, financial consulting, training, and financial management services to her clients in both the for-profit and nonprofit arena. Her mission is to develop businesses toward financial profit and growth as they maintain sustainability in the long term. And last but not least, we have James Q. Dean. He is the founder and president of JD Financial Group. Nationally, he is distinguished as one of a handful of African American managing directors in the financial services industry. James has been a financial services professional for 12 years and is a certified business coach. Financial services has allowed him to inspire individuals from all walks of life to have confidence in their finances and financial goal settings. Without further ado, I present to you Samantha Dillingham, Lisa McDowell, Samantha Dillingham, and James Q. Dean.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Again, I am Lisa McDowell. I'm so glad to be here with you. My challenge for today in 15 minutes is building internal capacity of your nonprofit to get funding to meet your mission through legal compliance. There are three basic phases of your legal compliance. You begin with the initial legal compliance, you have ongoing legal compliance, and then you need to do issue spotting periodically as you operate your nonprofit. What the foundation for having the type of nonprofit that people want to fund is having quality formation documents. You can easily go online and find an online service to provide some documents for you, but they may not get you to the goal you want, which is funding. If those documents are inconsistent, if they don't line up with your state's law, if they have recitations within the bylaws or the articles that do not comply with the IRS, or they miss spots, you may have wasted your money. You really do need to go to experienced professionals, be they an accountant, be they an attorney, but they need to be familiar with nonprofit work. You can get any accountant to fill out the 501c3, but if they don't understand what the nonprofit arena requires and what the IRS is looking for, you will not be able to get 501c3 status. If you go to an attorney who does not know what the law is regarding board members and them being paid, and they just crank out whatever's already online that they already have, you're not able to meet your goals. So it's important that you start with high quality documents that outline your mission, where you operate, how you divide the workload among the people that help you, and who handles your money.
If you do not have that information, you will not get off to a good start. I like people to think about their formation and that initial phase and the whole work toward funding your nonprofit as people being at the top of the hill. Those are your target people. Those are the people you want to serve and you want to help. You're at the bottom of the hill, and funding is this big boulder. If you are going to push that boulder uphill and you try to do it by yourself, by about halfway up, that boulder is going to roll back down on you and you're not going to be able to handle it. But when you have quality documents, you put together a quality team, they can help you push that funding uphill and get it to the people who need it. Our community and communities across this country need funding. There are people in need, and in order for you to provide those needs, you have got to have a good start. There are 3 T's that I like to talk about. You need to be on target. What is it you're trying to accomplish? You need to put together a quality team, and then you need to operate from a place of truth. You need to do what is in your heart to do. If you're not doing it out of a place of truth, it will come across to people. When you go to get funding, if you don't believe in what you're doing, no one else will. In addition to those high quality documents that you need, just not something just Xerox. I've seen people actually bring me bylaws that somebody else had and an operating agreement or a constitution, and it's got all kinds of typographical errors in it. It leaves out certain key statements. Those are not the type of documents that a funder will look at and give you anything but the door. That's all they're going to show you. There are certain pitfalls that you have to look at. People have to understand what nonprofits do and what they can't do. Some of the things that are can't do's, though we're in a hot political climate, there's a lot going on. Your nonprofit is not there to promote an individual candidate. I've seen nonprofits, even churches, have candidates put their sign in the yard in front of their building. That's a non-starter, because you can have your exempt status revoked if you are not following the rules. And one of them is that you agree not to get involved in the political arena promoting particular candidates. It is so important that you continue to serve the community. Nonprofits sometimes get waylaid by trying to do things that are for-profit services. Someone may come to them and say, oh, you know, I know you want to provide footwear for children who don't have shoes in the community. I know that's what you said in your documents. But guess what? We have this new wireless connection device, and we want you to sell it for us. And we think we can make a lot of money. That's unrelated business income. That's not related to your goals. That's taking you off task. You state a mission, you state your goals in your organizational documents. And if you begin to do those things that make you look like a for-profit, you can have your tax exempt status revoked in some cases, and in other cases, you'll have to pay tax. And the whole point of starting a nonprofit is so you won't have to pay taxes on the money. But if you decide to compete with the person down the street who's selling this wireless connection service, you are no longer serving your mission. You're off task. And that's why it's important to have documents, to know what they say, and to come back with them. Because again, we're on that hill. We're pushing that boulder of funding up to the people who need it. And if we're over on some other hill, we're off target. And those people who need us will never get the services they need and deserve. Nonprofits are not a one-man or one-woman show where you can just say, hey, you know, I'm going to do this by myself. It takes a group of people working together and understanding what the mission is, who is best suited to achieve that, and how we're going to do that together. We need our ongoing legal compliance. And part of that is getting your team together and organized. A lot of organizations have a treasurer, and all should. If you don't have a treasurer, you have a problem in terms of how your organization handles money. It's very important that you handle money in a way that represents integrity. As our first speaker said, Councilwoman, this morning, that funders talk about you and they will express their opinions about you. And if you are known for not handling money well, if you have a treasurer who may have had some issues with the law or does not handle money in a way that shows integrity, you got to be careful about who you have on your board. You got to be clear about how you handle the money. I even tell nonprofits, you may want to put your nonprofit account at an account other than where you personally or the treasurer personally does business. You know, we're chatty, we like to talk, we're social. That teller may just deposit it into the wrong account. Now, maybe that person didn't mean anything, that $10,000 got deposited into the wrong account. But people are going to think you did it on purpose. So you want to avoid the look of impropriety and make sure that you do those little things that really can help you in the long term. Another issue that may come up that may seem like a non-issue, you really do need to understand who is on your board, what their strengths are, what their shortcomings are, and whether or not they're experiencing financial pressure. You really don't want to put somebody in place who is going through some major financial upheavals. Perhaps they're bankrupt, perhaps they're having issues with a spouse. And finances are a real issue. I've seen nonprofits where that spouse gets a hold of that bank statement and goes for the nonprofit money. And spends nonprofit money to get back at a spouse. So there are so many personal issues that can interfere and impact your integrity. So you got to know among who you serve, you got to know who you're putting over your money and have checks and balances. You know, we all make mistakes, but if you don't have good organizational documents, bylaws, processes and procedures to make sure you have those checks and balances. I'm getting into Samantha, so I'm going to back up out of here and go on to employment law compliance. Many times we think, okay, nonprofit, we're just a nonprofit, we're not really a business. Once you take on employees or staff, you are held to the same standards of any other business. So the withholding, that has to be submitted in a timely way, as any other business organization would do. If you're just doing volunteers, you still want to have some kind of written agreement with the volunteers, so they know what it is expected of them if it's just a one page. If they're doing more extensive things, you may need to go into more detail, and you need to have people advising you who understand what the pitfalls can be, so you can be very clear with your volunteers and your staff about what it is they are expected to do and the compliance that's necessary. Even OSHA compliance, if you decide, oh, we've got to get that building, and you get that grant to get that building, you need to make sure the building is safe, it has the type of insurance that's necessary. If you have a break room, there are OSHA signs, so you need an employment lawyer once you get to that part, or someone who is steeped in human resources and understands what the needs are. So you need to go through, once you have those documents in place, once you have your people in place who are competent, well-trained, and well-skilled, then you need to go back and revisit what we're doing, how we're doing it, and if we're doing it well. There are insurances that you can get as a board once you're established, and you can include this in your grant requests. Some grants will fund directors and officers' liability insurance. That assures that if there's an issue with the treasurer or some other officer, that you have some insurance coverage to protect your nonprofit. It's typically not the type that a startup that's grassroots might have, but once you have the funding and you have those multiple streams, as we heard Councilman Susan mention before, you need to look at covering yourselves as directors, because sometimes people do things by mistake. They just don't know that there's some compliance that's required. So one of those compliance issues is the charitable solicitation license. Different states have different policies regarding charitable solicitation license. It's a movement, or I see it as that. Initially, it was developed in some states because there were people who were coming in claiming that they were nonprofit experts and they could raise $1 million for you. And they were basically con artists. And they have done a lot of damage in the nonprofit world. So state legislatures decided that they would come up with some rules and policies and register these nonprofit fundraising consultants. Well, that has changed and shifted and morphed, and now nonprofits themselves are required in some places to have a charitable solicitation license. And then there's a move nationally to have a national type of charitable solicitation license, but that's something that's in the works right now. But you need to be aware of that and know that as you move up that hill to get that boulder up to those people who need the funding, as you deal with bigger funders, they're going to look for things like that. And if you haven't done your charitable solicitation license, it may knock you out of the funding. So you need to keep those things in mind, understand what's required, and do what is asked in a timely way. Major grants also require follow-up. Sometimes that has not been delegated. I've seen organizations where they get this grant, they're thrilled, but the grant required that you take pictures, that you document what you've done, that you show how the money was spent. And if there's a transition in your nonprofit organization and you don't have a procedure in place to make sure that compliance is done, there are funders who will ask you for the money back. So you need to be really clear because it's like a contract, an agreement. And when you agree to do certain things, you are held not to a consumer standard, but you are held to a business standard for any contract that you sign for your nonprofit because you are a business. So you definitely need to make sure that you have that kind of follow through in place. There's some nonprofits that provide daycare or services for older adults. If there is a certain type of licensing required for the facility or for the individuals that provide those services, there needs to be a process in place to make sure that the staffers are current with CPR or other requirements that the state has. So you really do need that board to work with you or a committee of the board to make sure that you are checking the boxes so that when you go to the funder, you don't have an article in the newspaper that says the license of this nonprofit has been revoked, because that will take you off the list and your boulder will fall back down. But we want to push that boulder up the hill by continuing those periodic assessments, looking at what is the risk we're taking on. Are we dealing with people who are fragile? What kind of protection do we need to give to both our volunteers and the people they serve? One of the things that nonprofits have to look to, especially if they deal with children, they may need to have volunteer background checks, and that needs to be worked into your grant funding to make sure that you are not exposing children to predators. You also need to be careful with that on social media. I know I work in my church organization with children, and we've decided that for our LinkedIn, for our, Julius will talk to you more about the tech, but for our meetings online, you certainly need to make sure you can lock the door and you know who's coming into the meeting. Whenever you want to use pictures of children, you need to make sure that their guardian or their parent has a permission slip in place. So we need to think through every new project we're taking on, the people that are going to come in, who is going to be around these children, who is going to make sure that they are safe, because our children are so valuable and you don't get a second chance on those issues. Last but not least, scams. Nonprofits are also the victim of scams. So you do have to be very careful. Every opportunity that looks like it may be something that is wonderful may not actually be. So if somebody comes to you and says, oh, we've got $50,000 and you just have to give us your bank account number and we'll fund your nonprofit, you need to be wary because people aren't just giving money away. I know we want it. We want to believe that that money's just going to drop down in our lap. But if it's worth it, it's going to take some time and some investment. They're going to ask some things of you. They're not just going to give you money because you say that you need it. You need to have a process in place, an application process, or it may not be legitimate. You need to make sure everyone on your board gets regular information about what the current scams are and how to protect the organization through having quality people doing your social media and your computer software. You need to have virus protection, especially if you keep any data on people. You need to share and give disclosures about what kind of information you retain, especially credit cards, because there are national requirements if you're going to retain credit card information on file. So there are a lot of ongoing things that you need to do to protect your nonprofit, to continue moving up that hill and getting those things we need to serve the community and make a positive impact. And I'll turn it back over to our next panelist. I believe that is Samantha.
Thank you, Lisa. I am so grateful to be here today, and for all the attendees and the panelists, I say a big welcome. I want to wrap my arms around you. I can't see you, I can see your names, but I just want to kind of give you a virtual hug and get some energy going, because you know what, talking about legal and finance can be quite intimidating. It can seem like something heavy, something we don't want to get into. But today we want to make it simple for you by letting you ask the questions. We want to know what you want to know. We've had a morning which gave you quite a bit of information. I want to recap some of the things I heard. I heard Councilwoman say that it is a business. Your nonprofit is a charity, but it's also business. So you have to run it in a way that it is set up and strategically running like a business. However, you have to approach it from a different angle because you have all of these compliance things to keep up with the IRS, with the state. But I also heard her say that funding is about relationships. So we're talking today about a business that wants to meet the needs of people, that wants to meet the needs of the community, and at the same time build relationships with the donors so that there could be some connection, some contact, so that you can get the money. And we're here to help you do that today. So I just want to say thanks for being here. I want to say that you're part of the foundation that we're building at the STCC Nonprofit Network, because you are helping us start the summit that we will continue to provide and reach out to many others. Today, my word for you is stability. So you've done your startup, you've got your board in order, you've got your policies and procedures in order, and you want to build some stability. Why do you need the stability? Because you want to get that funding. You want that money. You want more of it. You want to give away more of it. So you've got to figure a way to set yourself up so that you look good, not just on paper, but in the community. I love that video that we heard from the beginning, the TEDx talk with Ariva Martin. For those of you who missed it, please log in early tomorrow at 9:45 and you will see it. And it was a short TEDx that talked about someone saying there is no profit in nonprofits. And she went on to end that the profit is to the beneficiaries, to the community that we serve. And sometimes it may seem like that term nonprofit may be like a misnomer, like something that just doesn't fit, because a lot of people will hear the term nonprofit and think you're here not to make a profit. That means on paper, you can't show that you have reserves, you can't show that you've got money in the bank. And that is not, we all know that, right? That is not the meaning of the word nonprofit. It is not for the profit of the board or the directors or the officers of the organization, but it is for the benefit or the profit of the general public. So that's why we start nonprofits, so that we can benefit others. But I want to say that you build that stability by making sure that your board understands the terminology of nonprofit. I know we're talking about finance, but you can't really go into the money if you don't know or understand what you're here for or the definition of who you are. So making sure that every board member understands what it means to be a nonprofit. They understand the terms and the terminology. And then you go into terms of finance. So you want to make sure that your board is completely aware of what to expect financially. Some of those expectations may be federally, some may be state, some may be community, some may be from the donors, but regardless of what it is, the board needs to stay informed. So build stability by giving the information to your board, the knowledge, the training that they need. You also want to build stability with your policies and procedures. If you don't have those in writing when you go to get funding, get a grant, and you don't have anything to show on paper as to what your policies are, your financial policies are, how you handle your bank account, what does the treasurer do, who helps the treasurer in verifying and reconciling your records, then it will be harder to get that funding because the funder cannot see what your guidelines are. So stabilize your policies and procedures and have them in writing. And also stabilize the health of your nonprofit by planning with a budget. There is the bad word budget, but it's really not a bad word. It's a great word. It's a word that tells you that you're going to have what I call a numerical picture of your mission. If you have your mission statement and your vision statement out on a paper with some pictures on it, the numbers will tell you what that mission and vision looks like. So it also helps you plan. It also helps you analyze and strategize about what you're going to do for that fiscal year. So make sure that you have a budget that helps and gives you the guide. I don't want to keep you too much on the opening because I want to hear your questions, but I do want to say to you that when a funder is looking at your financials, they're looking, I just grabbed this from the United Way. This is less than a week old. The United Way was funding some nonprofit organizations, and what they required said organizations must have a demonstrated ability to deploy resources quickly, to effectively scale their efforts. They must have the ability to track and report on utilization and the outcome of the data. So that just means that you have to keep records. You have to show on paper that you're stable. You have to show on paper that you can do the work. You have to show with your stats. I believe it was Julius who said that you keep a digital impact report. Keep those reports to show what you're doing and how it's impacting the community, because once you have that, you can say, here's who we are, what we're doing, and this is the proof of what we're doing. So keep track of what you're doing. You can ask all the financial accounting questions in the Q&A. I'm not going to break that down, but I do want to encourage you to build stability and build it with integrity. Make sure that your team has integrity so that everything that's on paper reflects exactly what you're doing and that there are records and receipts and reports to back it up. We're going to turn it over now to Mr. James Dean, who is the president of JD Financial Group. He will talk to you a little bit more about moving on to the next level of financial stability.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. Just to introduce myself, I'm James Dean. I'm the founder of JD Financial Group, and it's just a pleasure to be here today, to be with all the rock stars. Just been on this panel with Lisa and Samantha. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about can be a little bit redundant, but that also shows the importance of having a professional team. Most businesses fail because they don't have a professional team. I would say Samantha is probably the most important once you get up and you get regulated, and that's leaning on somebody like Lisa and her expertise. But I see a lot of businesses fail just because of accounting. Where our firm come in, or my expertise, we come in and we start talking about sustainability. So how to grow that organization And what does that look like, right? Because you built your organization off of a vision and a mission. And so most visions and missions are going to pass who you are and where you are now, right? Because one day we're all going to pass, right? And so do you want that organization to last past you? And so with doing that, a lot of times we have different financial vehicles. We have different ways that we can structure your organization to do business succession planning and strategizing past who you are. Who will take that mantle or that baton from you? And a lot of times there's a great book out. It's called E-Myth Revisited, and it's by Michael Gerber. And he talks about the different personalities that we all have inside. We have a manager, we have a technician, and we have the entrepreneur. Well, the technician is the person that's like the widget maker in economics. That's the person that has this vision, and they're trying to deliver that vision towards the market. The problem is a lot of times we don't know what the market actually wants. So a lot of times we don't take the pulse, we don't survey the market to see exactly how we can carry out our specific product and service to the market. The other person is the manager. Well, the manager is the one who keeps you organized, keeps the systems and the processes together so you can have the structure and the internal capacity that Samantha was talking about earlier. But the entrepreneur is very important. The entrepreneur is the person that kind of lives in the future, and sometimes he gets in trouble from the manager because you can't sabotage today for tomorrow. However, you do have to have foresight, and you do have to look towards tomorrow. And so what does your organization look like for tomorrow? What's the nuances that's coming down the pipeline that could counsel or enhance your organization? One of the things that organizations struggle with is getting good talent. You're only as good as your team. We know that from sports. As much as we talk about who's the best basketball player, they're only as good as your team. So what does your team look like, and how are they appreciated? And so one of the ways that you can do that is putting up certain structures in your organization to make sure that your key people feel appreciated and that you have a very attractive structure within your organization. This will help you with recruiting, and this will also help you with sustaining your organization. The ladies before me, I'm one out of 7. I have 4 sisters, so they all beat me up, right? So the ladies, they covered a lot, and like I said, a lot of things that we're going to do, they all overlap. But one of the things I would really tell you that you need to do, or inform you that you really need to do, is make sure you have a professional team. That's the biggest key. And I hope out of this that you saw the different professions and how we all work together. A lot of times with organizations, they have one person doing a lot of things. And sometimes it's just from a cash flow point. But then there again, that's going back and starting to earmark different, and that's talking about that word budget, but earmarking some things and some different services that you can bring in or professionals, because you're only as good as your team. And thank you. I'm going to turn it over for Q&A, and I think Dr. Ado is going to do that. Thank you.
Has been really okay. Here we are. So as you can see, we have a powerhouse team, not only for the board development and leadership, not only for IT, but definitely on the financial management side. As I mentioned earlier, your programs and services are connected to the money, and money is just not something that you can afford to be afraid of in your business operations. So, you want people to show you the money, and there's some things that we want to help you do as nonprofit leaders so that you can do that effectively. So we've gotten our first question, and I'm going to be fielding questions. If you would, you probably see a chat or a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions, please put them there. But my first question is, what types of financial reports should a nonprofit review on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis? Okay.
All right, Dr. Ado, I'll take that question. So your nonprofit reports are similar to, if you're familiar with for-profit reports, they're very similar. They're just called something different. Your first report that you would review, before I get to the reporting, I must say you must start with the budget. Before you get to reporting, you must start with a budget, because if you don't have a budget, that means you're not becoming active, you're not growing, you're not funding, and so you will have nothing to report on. But however, once you start reporting, you will report on what some of you know as a profit and loss. And the profit and loss in the nonprofit arena is called the statement of financial activities. And that will report your revenues first, how you receive income, and then you'll show your expenses. What is different about a nonprofit statement of financial activities is how you show those expenses and how you show the revenue. So the IRS has these categories called functional expenses. And so your expenses need to be shown in the category of program services. Then you also show your fundraising expenses, and then your general operating and management expenses. Instead of just having all of your expenses lined together, you do need to categorize them into those functional expense categories, and so that it is easy to use both on the state and the federal side. So that's one of the reports. The other report would be your statement of financial position, which in the for-profit world is known as a balance sheet. And that would show your assets and your liabilities. Now, in the nonprofit terminology on your reports, because you're called a nonprofit, on the bottom line, you're not going to see the word profit or loss. You're going to see the word assets. So I know it's you see it sometimes, but technically, the term to use for your asset is a gain in your assets or a loss of your assets, because the IRS wants to take away that term profit in the nonprofit financial world, so that we're not looking at it as a profit that we have earned for a business to distribute to our staff or the officers. And the other report would be your cash flow to show how that works, and your budget to your actual expense. How often you show these reports, it really depends on the nonprofit. If you're not operating and you're not funding and you're kind of just building, then you may do quarterly reports. But once you start moving and once you start having activities, then you do want to show a monthly report. Even if you're not meeting about it, at least send it out so all of the board members can see on a monthly basis how the nonprofit is doing financially.
Yes, I also do have a cherry to put on top of that wonderful financial information. Just basically making sure you stay on top of those bank statements. It is so important to know what is coming in and what is going out, if bills are being paid. So that is one of the checks and balances that you really need in your operating procedures. So it shouldn't just be the treasurer getting a bank statement at their house. You need to have at least two people who don't write checks and are not part of the financial system coming back and looking at that each month. So you have that clear information that the money is being spent in the way that you assume that it's going to be spent, and there's no fraud going on. So it's very important to review that. And you do want to have that annual financial statement. It can be very general, along with your tax exempt status letter, because the public does have a right to get information about nonprofits, because you are benefiting the community, not yourselves. So they can ask to see someone from the public. You do have to, you can set up a meeting at your convenience, but they can ask to see your 1023 letter and a general statement of finances, not the details of what everyone makes or everything, but generally how you're using that to benefit the public.
All right, thank you. So panelists, we have our second question. We have heard a lot regarding having a team approach to having a successful nonprofit. It seems that these are all at a cost. Where do you begin? All are important. Who do you employ first? Can you find any of these services pro bono?
I guess the ladies want me to talk first. I see Samantha smiling. Um, I told you I'm good at this. I have 4 sisters. I would say if you're just starting your organization, you need a lawyer, right? You need somebody that's going to make sure the legalities of your organization is correct. But right there from that handoff, you need somebody like Samantha that's going to help you with the accounting side. Just being honest, I could sit up here and talk about my profession, but I think those are the first 2 things you need. And then from there, it's the entrepreneurship. What does that organization look like? It goes back to the man with the talent. What does growth look like, right? Because we all want to increase and grow. So if we want that, what vehicles can we put inside our organization? Or if we want a good team, how do we make our organization attractive enough to get good talent to our organization? So just to reiterate, I think if you're just starting out and you're trying to form the organization, you need a good attorney. And then right after that, you need an accountant.
Well, James, I have to piggyback on that. Just from experience, I'm a founder of a nonprofit. I've been treasurer and on the board of nonprofits. So I just want to say from a grassroots perspective, most of us, when we start, we do not have the money to pay an attorney, but we can find resources. I know that Dr. Ado is a resource in the community. She and her firm offers consulting at the small business centers. So you can get the assistance you need without having to pay for it. You just have to know where to look. So I would say to get started, if you haven't started your nonprofit, or if somebody's asking, where do I start? I'd say start with your community small business center. They typically do have resources you can use to direct you through themselves and their funding to other nonprofit consultants like SCCC Consulting. But if you have already started, then the next step, to me, the most important step and the most crucial step, which doesn't quote unquote cost you money unless you put in an ad in the newspaper, but it is to build your board. You have to have the team. If you don't have the team, then it's just hard to function. It's hard to move forward because you cannot do all of the work yourself. And once you have that team, you can reach out and build community committees that are non-board members. Of course, they need to be vetted in some way. There are policies and procedures for that. But once you get that going, you need to then start funding. And we talked about funding this morning. Councilwoman gave us some great information of where to find that. Your bank's a great resource. Go to where the money is. You also have to reach for donations and build all of that. But how do you get started? To me, some of us try to start first getting the money, and we don't have the team to help us get the money or the marketing. So to me, that's most important, is having the team set up, the team trained, and then moving forward, and then you can branch out. As to services, most important service would be bookkeeping. If you don't choose someone like me or my company, get a good bookkeeper, even if you have to pay them $15 an hour or what it takes to make sure that they're trained. And from there, you move on to one step at a time. But that's what I would recommend starting with.
I also want to piggyback on that. You can find so many wonderful resources from your public library. People would not believe the amount of information that is there. I believe we should invest in those things that are important to us. So I believe it is worth it to work some extra hours to find that money to really get quality consulting, whether it be from the accounting professional, the nonprofit professional, or the lawyer. There's some things you can't skimp on. So sometimes you have to understand that you are just, there's a saying that people spend for what they want and beg for what they need. We need to prioritize. If we say this nonprofit outreach means a lot to us, we're going to get some skin in the game. And sometimes it means asking everybody on the board to give some money so we can get that consultation. You would be surprised if you are sincere about what you're doing, you're passionate, people will be willing to work with you where you are. You may be able to find that nonprofit consultant if there are no lawyers or accountants in your area who are accessible, who understand nonprofit. So you may need to start to understand the process with somebody who can not do legalese or accountingese, but break it down for you so you can understand. But the more you educate yourself, the more money you can save because you already know, and you can have a lawyer review a document and say, well, are these articles and bylaws in line? And they may charge you a reduced fee. They may do an initial free consultation. So there are services that you can get, and you can work your way into being able to have these discussions and these relationships that we spoke about earlier that can allow people to give you a discounted fee or just do a consultation to review what you've already done. I also want to talk about the advisory board. The board of directors is a legally responsible entity. When they agree to serve on that, they are responsible for everything that that nonprofit business does. But you can also get an advisory board of people with an accounting background, with a legal background, or with a nonprofit background who may be willing to work with you and help you have some of the answers, who may know a lawyer that will work with you, or an accountant or accounting professional. So it's important to tap into those relationships and find people who may not want to sit in your monthly meeting, but who may be willing to consult with you or give you some advice and do things at an affordable rate. There are also legal clinics at the law schools that can help you with targeted issues. But if you want quality, you need to be willing to sacrifice.
And don't forget to send chocolates to the accountants.
All right, thank you, panelists. You know, I'm not on the panel, but I would just like to say that once you get past formation, your mind has to go towards what does the organization need to operate. And so this information that you're getting with this panelist conversation is really helping you with your strategic planning. Is a great question, like what do we do first? Because there's so many things that we need. But you know, you kind of need all of them. But this is why having the board and being able to talk through what is the strategy, what's the plan, what do we need to do first, is so critical. If you're still in year 1 or 2 of operating your nonprofit and you're not being intentional about growing the nonprofit, it's difficult because you've got to sow a seed to get a harvest. So sometimes we're looking for a harvest and we've put some seeds in the ground, but we also just have to be very strategic about where we're putting our time and energy. And the panelists mentioned some excellent community resources. North Carolina has the small business centers that are a part of community colleges here, and wherever you may be from, those small business centers are typically being funded to provide you with free counseling. So I would suggest that you check into those. So Lisa, I've got a few questions here, and I wanted to ask, the first question is posed this way: am I still responsible if I let someone else use my 501c3 designation?
Yes, that is an interesting question that has come up over the years, where maybe the 501c3 is dormant. They're not really allowing that because you must file every year your 990 form. But you really have to be cautious when you engage in any kind of joint venture with other people. They may come in, talk a really good game, have something already written out, say, oh, this is a copyrightable, workable plan. We're going to write it up in your name and we're going to do great things. They may go out, they may get the money directing it to their own address, and you may never see them again. Even if they are reliable people, they may not do the necessary compliance and respond in the way that whoever gave the money wants them to respond. They may have spent it, but if they don't do their compliance on the tail end and submit whatever kind of forms are required for that grant, you may be in a position of having to repay that money. So I would not recommend allowing people to use your nonprofit status. That said, when I did the Martin Luther King celebration in my community, because the year before there hadn't been one, I wrote the federal and state grants and partnered with a very dear friend of mine in an organization that my husband and I belong to. Now they manage the money. Their treasurer managed our money. So and their president. So it was clear that we could partner together. I had a vision. It lined up with what they wanted to do to impact the community. But in the end, they were the ones who held the purse strings and made sure all the compliance was done. So it's still your responsibility if your name and your EIN number is on that grant application.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. James, this question is for you. The question is, how do I get donors or more sophisticated donors to give to my nonprofit organization?
Okay, so that's a loaded question. And I would say, first of all, you will have to have Samantha and I there, because you want to create a win-win strategy. You want to talk about the cost, and you also want to talk about how to put, how this organization can position themselves with community presence. Right. And so a lot of organizations are looking for write-offs. They're looking for ways to move money because they have great people like a Samantha. And so I would say, don't chase the money, chase the relationships, and whatever your organization, the core values that your organization has, find the same similar core values into the donors or these other organizations, and talk about having a shared relationship. And then that creates the win-win, and the money is the byproduct, right? And so that would be my advice. But there are a lot of financial vehicles out there. There are some sophisticated ways that you can have conversations with people that have money, but sometimes they need an aha moment. They need to say, oh, okay, yeah, this and that. And that's when it comes in to having a professional team, because you might have to have an accountant to sit down and say, hey, where do you usually write your money off at the end of the year? And what do you usually do with that? And how do you earmark those things? And are you looking to do more? Or did you make a lot of profit this year and you need to do more? And so those things can be founded by professionals like us. Thank you.
Thank you. And while we have you there, I want to kind of follow that question up with some other ways that nonprofits can raise money and receive donations.
Okay. It will definitely be, I can tell you this, that a lot of people have assets out there. Samantha talked about this, whether it's personal finance or it's in their organization, that they're not going to do anything with. Baby boomers right now, their biggest thing is they're scared about spending down their assets, right? So they're holding on to all of this money, whether it's a retirement plan, whatever it is, they're holding on to it, and they don't want to give it to their kids because they think their kids are irresponsible. So that could be a good opportunity for you to come in and talk about, hey, this could be a way to show your kids how to serve the community, because if you take care of the community will take care of you. And also it's a win-win because they can use some of that money that they were going to sit on and they can donate it there. So there's a lot of financial products depending on your situation, the way your organization is structured, whether it's a sole prop and whether it's an LLC or S Corp, you can go and talk to these other businesses, and the way that they're going to give to your nonprofit would be a little bit different. So I think that's why it's important to have that accountant there, so they can say, hey, this business is structured here, it's structured like this, and this is how they could give towards your nonprofit.
Thank you. That's a great observation. I think typically in the nonprofit world, there's kind of been kind of a separation. The for-profit businesses over there and the nonprofits are over here. And what I really believe that this pandemic has done for us is helped all of us see how we really are very much interconnected. If you follow the news, you can see that a lot of for-profit businesses started allocating money to support nonprofits who were doing community work. And so I think that's a trend that's going to continue, so that for the nonprofit, as a leader, you need to position yourself to be able to talk through your vision, your mission, and share that with people outside of the nonprofit who are also potential funders. Tell your story and then make the ask. So again, it just kind of always comes back to relationship. And you may not have the relationship, but this is where your board is so critical. Everybody on your board should have a sphere of influence and have a willingness to talk to them about what the nonprofit needs. And so this is kind of how we see things starting to gel. Samantha, I'm going to send you an accounting question. And the question is this: are there special guidelines for nonprofit bookkeeping? Is it any different?
There are no specific guidelines in the sense from the IRS. So we always have to ask, what does the IRS want? And because that's who we're reporting to, and the state. So the IRS, by the way, I'm going to give you guys a little nugget. If one night when you're having some wine, just go on the IRS website and plug in these numbers. Put in charities and then type in 4552 PC. And it's a 28-page long governance document which the IRS has for nonprofits, and everything you need to know. It's really, really well written. It's not boring, I promise. And everything you need to know is in that document for your governance and financial structure of your nonprofit. And it answers that question. It answers the question of, is there a specific way we need to keep our record keeping? Now, you need to keep you need to keep records, that they made clear, but a specific way, not necessarily. However, there are accounting guidelines that help make your nonprofit financials clear, so that when you fill out those year-end forms, like your 990, that's a federal form, and when you fill out your state form, it's easy for the accountant to just grab the information from a line and put it in the right box instead of trying to add different things up. So we talked about functional expenses before. That would be one guideline. But whether you keep it on a spreadsheet or whether you keep it on a software, the IRS doesn't care, as long as it's accurate and as long as the information that they need is there.
Okay, and then Samantha, we've had a request to, if you could put that resource in the chat.
Oh, yes. I'd be
They
happy
would
to.
appreciate that. Coming your way. All right. Let's see here. Let's see, Lisa, you want to talk to us a little bit about some additional ways to fund nonprofits?
Yes, I was listening. What came to me, a lot of times people don't want to talk about death and dying, but it comes to all of us. And James spoke about those baby boomers who really feel that maybe their children need to learn responsibility and earn their own way. One of the things we can look at is doing a campaign where we ask for bequests, that people remember our charity in their will, or make them the subject of a beneficiary of a trust that they set up. These are ways, if you do a living trust or at your death with a will or a testamentary trust, that people who like what you're doing and they want to support it, they're with the mission, they can leave you money for the long term. Of course, Julius told us about our social media and having that give button on our Facebook or on our website to make sure you don't miss that opportunity that somebody just passing by might see you. There's also online giving through Givelify and other online giving sources where you can get that online source, and people who are seeing what you do, they can just give you money because they have found out about you. In certain states, nonprofits do not have to pay sales tax, but in other states, nonprofits like for-profits do have to pay sales tax. Well, there is a mechanism, I know in North Carolina and probably in other states, where every 6 months you can file an application with the Revenue Department to get a refund of your sales tax. It's a very passive way to get money back. It's money that you spent, but it's money that larger charities like the Red Cross and hospitals, they get thousands upon thousands of dollars back by filing those applications. So it's something that's simple to do, can be done every 6 months, and it's money you're leaving on the table. So those are 3 ways to think about raising funds in a little different way.
Thank you. And that's good to know. And so one of the things that we know even today, as we are providing you with operational support information, there may be some specifics that might differ or be a little different state by state. The IRS compliance information and anything you're going to get from them is always going to be nationwide. But there are some other things, like particularly what Lisa was talking about, the sales tax application. You'll have to work that out and figure out who that body is. It may be the state revenue department in your state to see how you go about actually applying for sales tax. Your 501c3 letter is going to exempt you from paying not only IRS income tax, but also sales tax in your state. And if you have made purchases and paid it, then what she's talking about is being able to recoup that money, which is, you know, something that I learned on a board that I didn't realize that could be done. And this nonprofit that I was on got back $2,000 every year just from filing that paperwork. So that's another passive way to get some funding. Let's see, James, we're going to come back around to you. And, you know, I think this is something that I know you all have become an expert at. And how do you position your business, your organization, your nonprofit to be more attractive so that you can recruit the kind of, we say talent, which potentially would be for staff, but definitely as it relates to board members?
I would say first that coming from an accounting point of view, that you should know how much your business is worth. And so a lot of times we do valuations for companies, because that's very important, because people are going to look up your information, like everybody said, and they want to know, is this a small mom and pop organization, or, you know, is it a big corporation? And however they identify with that, that's fine, but it's good for you to be aware of that. As far as attracting talent, I would say one of the things is learning how to bonus people, because you're only as good as the people that's in your organization. So the people that's in your organization will become an advocate for you in the market, and they will be happy, they will be excited. So learning how to bonus, learning how to maybe set up, in the older generation, they would say that they were vested. So learning ways to get people to feel vested, to feel like if I've been with your organization 4 or 5 years, then there's an opportunity, my organization is going to invest in me. And those things are huge, because a lot of times, coming from an accounting point of view, the organization can roll over some money, and there's ways to be tax sensitive with that. And so that's going right back again. I hate to be a dead dog, but it's really having the correct team. And I would also like to say, the highest form of financial services and on my branch or my division is estate planning. And everybody that's talking about estate planning is talking about, what does life look like when I pass? right? And so that brings us full circle talking about fulfillment. Everybody wants to live their life through the expression of their core values. So when you're talking about estate planning and you're talking about these people that have money, a lot of them are looking for ways to give money because that's part of their fulfillment. That's part of their core values. And so that's just a little tip that I would like to share. But just to come back around, just to make sure I'm clear on this, bonus structures, to form some kind of structure where people will feel vested, to make sure you have a good, when you've gotten to out of stage one, make sure some kind of way your organization could give some kind of benefits. And it might not be benefits that come out of the organization, but it could just that you're providing the resources for them to get benefits on their own. Thank you.
Thank you too. And I want to clarify that because his response in regard to the bonus or the benefits would be for your staff only. The board members cannot be compensated directly so that it looks like employment. There may be potentially some things that you can do once in a while, maybe an honorarium or something like that. But you want to be clear in your own mind about and understand that as your organization grows, and I realize sometimes when you're small, your nonprofit still has 3 board members, 4 or 5. It's kind of hard to think of and envision it the day that you actually have a staff and a team. And so some of the things that we're talking about, we hope that will get you excited about wanting to grow your nonprofit and help you see some of the benefits that come with actually adding more people on when they're strategically prepared and can really bring something to the table that's going to help your organization grow and serve more people. So Lisa, I wanted to ask a question because we've been talking about this transparency, and it's just incumbent in the operation of a nonprofit that folks be able to see some of the things. And so can you tell us a little bit about, well, and actually let me do this question with Sam. Samantha, can you tell us what the 990 is and why is that important to a nonprofit organization?
Sure. The 990 is the IRS expectation or requirement that nonprofits need to file at the end of their fiscal year. Now, when we talk about a fiscal year, that could be a calendar year from January to December. You will get to know what your fiscal year is by looking at your determination letter from the IRS telling you that you are a 501c3. And if you're not a 501c3 and you're just a nonprofit, it will be in your bylaws. But at the end of your fiscal year, you are required to file a Form 990. And that is the deadline for that form is on the 5th month, the 15th of the 5th month after the end of your fiscal year. So if you end in December, it would be May 15th. That form has 3 different, just like your individual return, you have different forms that you can file. Well, the 990 has 3 different types. And so for an organization that just makes 50 or has revenues of $50,000 or less for the year, if you don't want to fill out the detail of a 990 easy, then you can file what's called a postcard, just stating that you, and this is filed electronically, by the way, stating that your revenues were under $50,000 for the year, and you put in your tax ID number and your information and submit that, and the IRS will count that as an acceptable form of a 990 based on that criteria. But you do need to fill out a 990 easy or the full form depending on your income. So up 50 to 200,000 in revenues requires at least a 990 easy. Now that doesn't mean that if you make less than $50,000 in revenues for the year that you don't file an easy. You can choose to do that because that outlines and shows your actual revenues and expenses, so that your donors or any funder can see what's going on in your organization, even if it's $30,000. but you do have the option to just file a postcard if needed. And if you do not file that form in 3 consecutive years, the IRS will what is the word I'm looking for?
Automatically revoke.
Automatically revoke your 501c3. Thank you. And that takes a little bit of work to have that reinstated.
Okay, thanks very much. And if you'll check in your chat, we put in the name of that 990 form. So this is again why you really want to have a strong financial management support team to ensure that this paperwork is filed. And also this paperwork, as well as your state formation documents, are actually public record. I'm not sure if they're doing it anymore, but they used to actually make your 1023 EZ or 1023 form public record too, so that people can actually see what's happening with the money. And that's a very different requirement than what for-profits have to deal with. For-profits show their monies when they want to. Nonprofits have to show their money through this 990 filings and probably also through annual reports. Lisa, we're gonna bounce on back to you. And this is a question that talks about protecting the organization's finances. And the question is, what is the benefit of having my treasurer and financial secretary bonded?
This is not something that all organizations will have to do, but it's something that you really do need to consider when you're handling large amounts of money. Bonding is an insurance so that if there was some issue with especially the treasurer, but other officers, typically people working with nonprofits are doing things for the right reason, but occasionally a bad apple might fall in with your team. And you need to have that insurance to protect you personally from lawsuits. If you're acting in the best interest of the nonprofit and you just make a bad call, say you decide to get a blow up bouncy house for kids, and that bouncy house explodes and children are injured, you want to have just basic insurance, but you also want to have director's insurance. And that gets to more subtle issues of your business decisions. If your business decisions cause people to lose money, say you decided to take all your donors' money and put it in this investment, and the investment appeared to be something that was helpful, but actually was not, and all the money was lost. Those are bad decisions. People may want to sue over that. So you want to have that type of insurance to protect you in the long run, especially if you're dealing with populations, say people who have addiction issues, people who have they're returning to society from incarceration. They have special issues that require special care. And there's a standard of care that you need to have that's reasonable. And if the board made a reasonable decision, but the outcome was bad because of what they had recommended in this program, the lawsuit may exceed their coverage. It may not be a slip and fall. It may not be something that is covered by standard insurance, but this protects your directors and officers if there's a lawsuit. So some professionals may be more willing to get on your board if they know that you have that, because it's an assurance to them that their assets will be protected and their service to the community won't result in a financial loss.
All right, thank you so much. I hope you all are enjoying this. We're actually winding down. The time has gone so quickly. But like I said, we're just blessed because our team is just very informed. Many of us have been in this field for over 20 years. And so we're really happy to be able to bring you that give you access to a professional team of nonprofit business consultants who can help you with some of the issues that we know come up that are part of nonprofit operation. So I'm going to save my last question for the accountant. And so, Sam, I wanted to ask this question because I've been asked it numerous times, and it is this: can the nonprofits start receiving donations before they have the 501c3 approval?
Oh yeah, that's the short answer is yes. The short answer is yes, because you can start receiving donations prior to your 501c3 approval, because once you're approved by the state and you file for your 501c3, within 27 months, the IRS will backdate your 501c3 to your formation date with the state. However, if you've been receiving donations for a period of, say, 12 months, which would be a fiscal year, and you don't have that 501c3, the state still regards you just as a nonprofit, not as a tax exempt. And believe it or not, nonprofits that are not tax exempt do pay taxes. That's something that a lot of people do not know. So once you start a nonprofit organization, if you do not have your 501c3 exemption from the IRS, which is a completely different status, and you do not file within a year and receive that letter backdated, you will most likely have to file a corporation return and file and pay taxes on any assets that you have acquired, or what would be considered by then a profit. But to go back to the question, if you do receive funds or donations prior to getting your 501c3, what you have to do is disclose to the public that you are not 501c3 approved, so that the public is aware that you're asking for money without that approval. Even if you're a nonprofit, you need to disclose that you are not a 501c3 exempt organization with the IRS, and that their donation may not be tax deductible. So the answer is yes, but it's a huge risk if you do it.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're about to close out for the day. However, I do want to give Lisa and James just kind of one last opportunity to share an observation, a note, or just kind of a gold nugget that our guests can take away from us from this time together today. So ladies first, Lisa, do you have like a gold nugget that you can share very quickly?
I guess my gold nugget is you need to see your nonprofit work, everything you do, as being under the microscope. How would this look to someone else? A lot of times we can mean really well, but if this would not look good to someone else, if it would create bad relationships, we need to make decisions based on that. And I think we make better decisions when we believe that we were on camera for the world to see. Will we do this if everybody else could see us? Keep that in mind whenever you do things.
Okay, thank you so much. And James, you got a gold nugget for us, sir?
I guess I would say if we were using the metaphor as your organization being something that you birthed and had the idea, and it came from your creator, then I would say a lot of people will help you raise your baby, but they don't want to have it for you. And so when you do that, you want to separate you from your organization, and you want to make sure you put the systems and the processes in place to make sure that it looks like an organization on paper, and to make sure that there's growth. And one last thing, Peter Drucker says that culture eats systems and processes. So make sure that you have somebody like an Ado or somebody that can come in like a Dr. Ado that does leadership training and executive training, because your culture will determine technically how much money you're going to get, just being honest. And thank you for the opportunity.
Do I get a golden nugget?
Yes, Samantha, you get a golden nugget.
That was sweet.
You know, I'm the baby of the group, so I'm gonna act like the baby. But I do have a golden nugget. The golden nugget I want to leave you with is, whenever you are part of a nonprofit, whether you're the founder, the board member, the volunteer, but really the founder and the board members, be comfortable with accountability. If you own a for-profit business, your own business, making your own money, your accountability is important, but this nonprofit accountability is the top of your list. The IRS is holding you accountable, the state is holding you accountable, and the donors are holding you accountable. The community is actually holding you accountable. So you get comfortable with accountability and build stability with financial integrity. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we are really, really pleased, and we just thank you again for being with us. We're going to close at 2. I do have a couple of things I want to put in front of you before we do that. The first thing I want to do is actually thank each one of the members of the STCC Consultant Network. Everyone that you've heard from today, except for Councilwoman Harrison, are members of our network. We are business consultants who've been working together over the past 3 years in the community, building and growing nonprofits. And we, in this new season, decided we would come together as a group, as a network, as members actually of the STC Consulting LLC. We're launching a firm. Very, very shortly, actually in these moments, we are in the process of launching as a firm, as a network, and we're here to serve you. We are going to follow up after tomorrow's presentation with a recap. It will include a link for the recording. We've gotten some questions about that. We'll also have resources there, and you will get our individual contact information, websites, phone numbers, so that if you want to reach out to us, you'll be able to do that as well. I also want to take a moment to thank Latasha Anderson, Lifestyle Strategist team. This wonderful, fluid virtual conference platform has been put in place by Ms. Anderson and her team. We want to say thank you to them for all of their hard work in helping us get things together so that we can make this an enjoyable and easy experience for each one of you. Tomorrow, we're going to feature nonprofit practitioners. So we've got 4 practitioners that are going to be coming from the community to share their successful funding strategies. And I'm excited about this panel discussion tomorrow because we actually have the executive director of a community-based organization that is celebrating its 50th anniversary. We have a nonprofit advisory board member whose nonprofit is doing something very interesting, kind of blending for-profit and a nonprofit form. He's going to talk about that. We have a faith-based nonprofit leader, community leader tomorrow. And we also have a relatively new nonprofit organization that is providing services totally in the virtual space. So we're going to bring you people who are operating their nonprofits in a variety of ways, who are going to share their funding strategies. And there's a question about getting digital copies of the presentations. We can certainly put that together for you as well and make sure that you'll have that, although the presentations will actually be included within the recording, but we can certainly talk about making that available to you, and thank you for asking. So we've been doing a lot of talking, but now I need you to do something for us. We are going to ask you to answer a poll. So you're going to see a poll pop up on the screen. You should see it now. And we're asking you to identify the top 3 business development services that would best help your organization meet its mission. When you give your 3 answers, and you can start answering now, please make sure that you hit the submit button after you put your answer in, and you can begin now. Okay, we've got 1 vote. So that's all you have to have. Right, great. All you have to do is start clicking, read through your listing there. And thank you so much. Our goal is to try to provide the type of information for you that you need to give you the access and to make it affordable. Because we know that in order for you to go to the next level, you're going to need support, and we're excited about being able to bring you an opportunity to have the support that you need. Okay, we'll take great. Thank you so much. All right. Just waiting on a few more folks. Okay, a little over half people have voted. If you want to take the opportunity now, they're great. Okay. And please do again, after you've given your top 3 answers, make sure that you hit the submit button. Okay. Just give you a couple of more minutes, and then we're going to end the polling. Okay. If everybody's had an opportunity to vote. Okay, so let's go ahead and end the polling now, please. Great. And if we can, and we're looking at the results here. Okay. So great. Thank you so much. You can see right ahead of you, right in front of you, just where your responses are. And thank you. This is going to help us so much in preparing to provide you with support going forward. So the very last thing I want to share with you is I want to invite you to log on tomorrow, 9:45 a.m. Come in, get in the chat, introduce yourselves. We're going to jump right into the panel discussion, and I hope that you can stay on the full 2 hours because we have an exciting announcement and launch and opportunity that we want to make available to you tomorrow at no cost. And so we appreciate it. So we thank you again for joining us. We ask that you have a great evening. It's Friday. Enjoy your Friday afternoon. And we will be back to see you tomorrow morning, bright and early at 9:45 a.m. Have a great evening, everybody, and thanks again.